Warning. The CounterSurveil podcast may contain content on hacking, cybersecurity, privacy, and sticking it to the man. By listening, you agree to the following terms. Number 1, not to use anything you learn here for evil. Pinky swear. Number 2, we are not responsible if you get arrested, your computer explodes, or you accidentally hack the planet. That's on you. So don't blame us if you're on 14 watch lists, but you still keep hacking. And choose not to learn better OPSEC, because watching old anime is more fun than learning new tradecraft. And remember, number 3, the NSA and FBI may be tuning in, but hey, that's part of the thrill, right? Wave hello to your FBI agent. They probably really think they're the good guys. Number 4, any resemblance to actual hackers, living or dead, is coincidental, except when it isn't. Wait, what? Number 5, so go grab your Jolt Cola, balls, and clubmate, or something a bit stronger. Be the stereotype everyone thinks you are and fire up your terminal and bite into this wild ride through the interwebs. Number 6, if you get owned, don't come crying to us. Just Control, Alt, and delete your tears away and suck it up. You're a hacker, damn it, not a crybaby. Learn from it, adapt and overcome. There's no crying in hackerable. So remember what the elders of the internet once said. The consequences will never be the same. Just don't blame us if you end up on a government watch list. Number 7, if we share first-person tales of daring hacks and cybercrime, it's for dramatic effect. We're storytellers, not criminals, allegedly. Number 8, our reward is basking in the glow of our screens and the satisfaction of a job well done. And stickers, those are like currency. We won't hawk whereas here, but if we like a tool or site, we may talk about it. Nothing is monetized. Also, screw those VPN ads every YouTuber has nowadays. You should all know better than to sell snake oil. Number 9, any clever puns dropped by Altkey that make you chuckle? Let's be real. Havoc thought of them first. He's just letting her have this one. What a guy. Careful, your internalized misogyny is showing. Number 10, happy hacking, folks. And remember, the only thing more secure than a password and YubiKey with a side channel vulnerability is a tinfoil hat. Trust us, we've tried both. Sledge looks most at home in the hat. This podcast may contain references to long-forgotten memes and internet culture references that were not funny the first time around, but will become so ironically eventually if you don't get the joke. Just smile and nod like you're at a party. All your base belong to us, but we still might not make any money off this podcast. We do this simply because it's fun. It's a labor of love, or at least a labor of elite hacker skills and intentionally bad AI-generated intros. Welcome to CounterSurveil. Noobs and lamers are just as welcome as elite hackers with 0 days under their belts and little else. Put on your black hoodies and prepare to jack in instead of off. It's about to get seriously cyber up in here. Remember, it's all just a story. Wink, wink.
Hello and welcome to the CounterSurveil podcast. I really need to shorten that intro. Drew, RedShift Porter is here with us this wonderful cast, and we're going to be talking with him a little bit about starting a cybersecurity consultancy, the do's, the don'ts, and related questions. So first off, let me put the slide deck up here. It's already up. Excellent. And Drew, welcome. So here's the structure we're going to try and go for here for this cast. We will likely deviate, but, you know, trying to stay on track. So who is Drew Porter, you may be asking out there? Drew Porter is a seasoned senior security analyst with robust foundation in various cybersecurity domains, including regulatory compliance and pen testing. His career spanned both private and defense sectors, allowing him to gain diverse insights into security challenges and solutions. Key roles in cybersecurity. He has held pivotal roles, including that of a mobile security exploit engineer, worked with a notable firm, Bishop Fox, has his own company now called... Drew, what's your company called?
I didn't know that was my part. Sorry. It's Red Mesa.
And your pen test reports look like something out of Half-Life, which I think is pretty cool.
I mean, the whole company's designed, the whole name's around Half-Life, right? So Black Mesa was already taken.
Well, there you go. I think Red Mesa was actually an expansion project too. So
yeah, it wasn't that great. We won't talk about that.
So Drew's varied experience contributes to a well-rounded perspective on security threats and mitigation, and his contributions to the community. In addition to his corporate roles, he actively contributes to the cybersecurity community by organizing events and competitions such as Root the Box, fostering collaboration and innovation among security professionals.
So, what did they season you with?
Mostly salt and pepper.
Good answer.
Everyone would say ginger, but, you know, I thought that was too much of a cop out answer.
Shoot, shoot, babe. All right. So, Drew, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background from your own perspective rather than what our AI tools were able to dig up on you?
Yeah. Yeah. So my background, just like a normal nerd growing up, played around with computers. My family didn't really have a lot of money, so I had to go and do literal dumpster diving in some cases to get parts for computers and stuff like that. Eventually my parents were able to get a computer home that was paid for by GTE, because my dad had to go to like some computer class and they let him keep the computer. So that was fun. And then just started playing around with stuff. Mostly in my younger years, it was all radio focused. And then that led into a career in exploit development against mobile devices, as well as anything that was communications based. So my role primarily was finding ODAs in like satellite communication platforms, mobile devices, TVs, and stuff like that. And then that was at the research lab. I left the research lab. Yeah, then I started working for Bishop Fox, and they were called Stock and Lou back then. And they were doing some cool stuff. They were really small at that time compared to where they are now. They're huge compared to where they were. They were still working out of the house.
Yeah, I remember the house.
And yeah, so I was there before they even hit 50 employees, and that was fun. Then I became a security executive. Then I got fired as a security executive. And then, at that time I was like 24 years old, and I was like, oh crap, what do I do with my life? Right. I thought I had the dream role, and now I just got fired from it, for not being a team player, as it was worded. But they gave me a check, so that was pretty cool. So I called my mentor, and actually, I called someone. He wasn't my mentor at that time. I called up a person and who was extremely successful in business. And I was like, hey, my name's Drew. We met at this one time, and I want you to be my mentor. And he was like, no. And I was just like, I don't want we make a deal where I don't ever say your name and I will never use your business contact. I just want your advice on business. And he was just like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So that's been our agreement. And he helps me with certain things, and helped me, kind of guide me to where I'm at today. Though he strongly disagrees where I should have gone. Red Mesa, when it first started, so after I got fired, I took 6 weeks off. Actually, I started Red Mesa right away, but then I didn't do anything for 6 weeks except buy every IoT device I could find on Amazon and start hacking them. And then I was like, oh crap, okay, I got to do this like business thing, I guess. And so Red Mesa first started out as a software company for 1 week. And then there's a few consultancies that were just not doing the most stellar job at making sure that their consultants were happy, and caring about the consultant over the customer. So I was like, I bet you I could do this better. And asked my mentor, and he's like, nope, don't do a consultancy. That's dumb. I ran a consultancy. He sold a consultancy for a boatload of money. And he's like, nope, it's the worst thing ever. Don't do it. And I was like, I think I could do it differently. And he was just like, if you're going to do a consultancy, follow the EY model, right? Ernst & Young. And he's just like, you just got to embed and make the client totally dependent on you. And I was like, nah, I hate that model. I despise that model. And I was like, I want to make one where it's like our goal is to make ourselves go out of business. And he was just like, you're an idiot. And I was like, okay. And he literally said, when your company crashes and burns 12 months after you do this, Let me know. We'll get you a CISO position again. And I was like, okay, fine. I think I could do this. And then, so I started it, and it been going pretty well.
That
Excellent.
was your
dude.
hold my beer moment.
Yeah. At well, he asked me at 12 months. He asked me, like, after he realized, like, oh crap, okay, this guy's still in business, and he's signing pretty good sized contracts. What is your goal? And I told him, oh, my goal is to just once I want to figure out how to do this, or I'm going to do this for like 7 years, and then I'm going to tell other people how they can start their own consultancy. And then he's like, okay, so you're going to, like, run your consultancy, make it worth a bit of money, and then sell that training. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not going to sell it. I'm just going to, like, give it away. And he's like, you're an idiot. Yeah, I remember he's like, you're the dumbest smart person I know sometimes, Drew. And I was like, thanks. Because it was the first time he ever called me smart. But yeah, so and that's what I've been doing. And I've been, distracted with other side projects. But the goal is to release this information. And part of that is like this podcast, right? So everything's open, how we do billing structures, how we do, what it's like bringing on your first employee, what's it's like bringing on your 8th employee, all that stuff. Happy to talk about it.
Excellent.
Cool.
Yeah, we certainly got a lot of questions for you.
Yeah. The moment kind of
so
passed
the
by,
com-
but I was going to say, I was trying to dig up that picture of you standing in front of it's at the Bishop Fox. It's the original 20 or 50, I can't remember, people. And you really do look young. I just wanted to say, put that out there. You look like a kid. You're like, is that Drew?
Yeah, I was a kid. And when I got hired at that startup to do, to be the security executive, I still was a kid. And, I didn't really understand what it meant to lead a organization in security at that time. So, I was still very rigid in my thoughts of security. I was like, oh, it's something insecure. Like, we could never allow anything like that.
Sorry to interrupt.
Accepting risk, didn't understand. So yeah, it definitely was young.
Oh man, if I can dig it up, we'll put it on the screen later.
I've got one.
Find it. Send
Him
it over to
standing
me.
on a table at college.
Was I in the suit?
Yeah, and you're doing something with the Ethernet cables.
Yeah, that was for Root the Box when we used to run that at UAT.
Speaking of Bishop Fox.
So what inspired you, man, to get into cybersecurity? Like, and did those experiences shape your approach to starting out and like working within this industry?
Yeah. So I didn't know like hacking was a job that you could do until one day I was in high school. I was in 10th grade, and my uncle, who I know worked with the government at some capacity, but I didn't really know what he did. He had lunch with me, and I never see my uncle. He lived in a different state. He's always traveling around the world for our government. And I was just like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's have lunch. And, so he's like, hey, this hacking stuff that you do, like you can make a job out of it. And I was like, what? Hacking stuff? What are you talking about? Right? Like downplaying like this whole thing. And because I was worried, because I'd never talked computers with him. So I was like very on edge when he was talking about that. And I remember the first thought that went through my head was just like, what does he know and how does he know it? So, I'm looking for black SUVs to pull up at that time and just arrest me or some dumb crap like that. And
that's every time I talk to you.
So I was like, what do you mean? What hacking stuff? And I've never heard him curse before, but he was like, don't play fucking dumb with me. And I was like, okay, yes, sir. He's like, seriously, like, if you don't get caught and you like keep on building up your skill set, you can do this for the government. And I was like, oh, okay, what does that mean? And then like we went through the whole process of like what that looks like, you know, getting a clearance, what's required with that. And you know, what's required, what type of skill sets I should be working on, what they're looking for, what they're not looking for. So it really shaped like where I was going with computers at that time. And I was like, okay, cool. And you know, in high school, I was trying to get a job with Booz Allen Hamilton. So what I used to do with my girlfriend at that time, who is now my wife, Booz Allen Hamilton would have like company events for their employees. So they'd have like company outings. And I would learn when those company outings were. And I would like just sneak into those company outings, pretending I was an employee of Booz Allen to meet the people that I was like interviewing with. And so
Nice.
That worked.
Yeah, did it work? I never worked for Booz Allen, so no, it did not work. They did interview me for an internship. They passed on me for that internship. They hired someone else, who I then learned they fired. But like a week later, because he was a terrible candidate, I guess. And they did give me a call and they're like, hey, would you be interested in an internship? And I was like, I'm going to Arizona because you told me I didn't get it. So I'm going to go to a school over here. And the school I went to. Yeah, what's up?
I've got a pin from Booz Allen, and after the Snowden things, I always go up to their table and be like, hey, it's a nice pin. It's the best thing from you guys that hasn't leaked yet.
Yeah, I remember after the Snowden stuff, we would change our name tags at Black Hat to like Edward Snowden, and then we'd walk to the Booz Allen Hamilton booth.
Is that who he worked for?
Yeah.
Okay. I was about to say I won one of their hacking challenges they throw and got an opportunity to interview, didn't take it, tried to do it later, and yeah, they passed.
Yeah. So, you know, I was bummed I didn't get the internship. But at the same time, I met tons of my friends because I didn't get that internship. I was able to go to a different school, a school I didn't even know existed called UAT. My same uncle was like, hey, you should go to this school. And I was like, this school looks like a joke. This school looks like the ITT Tech of dumb game design. And he was like, yeah, whatever, man. If you go to the school, you're going to get a guaranteed job with one of the agencies. And I didn't believe him. I was like, oh, I don't know. He hasn't led me wrong so far. So, you know, I applied and I got in. I don't know if they actually deny anyone from getting in at UAT. But I got in, and that's where I met people like Steve and stuff like that. So that kind of really shaped where I was going.
Any other cool people while you were there?
Any other cool people?
Well, there was an incident, right? No.
Steve's the only cool guy.
Right. Good answer.
Yeah, I met lots of cool people, right?
My whole life started at that school from all the connections we made.
Yeah.
What's the first?
Yeah, I think we all. I mean, lots of us still stay connected, right?
Yeah, the majority.
Literally on a weekly basis, we're all in a chat group, and we just share memes and bitch about security.
True. What was your first interaction at that school with the FBI? No.
Yeah, with the FBI. I did have interaction with Secret Service and FBI there. They came to my apartment and my dorm, but it wasn't for me. My first interaction at that school actually was for anyone from a government group, was meeting the NSA recruiter, which was literally day one. I did not know that was a thing, but yep, as soon as we got in there, day one, you know, you sit down, and I sat down with this recruiter, and she was just like, all right, are you interested in working with the NSA? And I said, yes. And I never worked with the NSA, just to clear that out. Never have I been a government employee.
Never have I ever.
And if he wouldn't be allowed to say.
I private sector all my life. So let's just get that out Lots of people confuse me for feds. The feds think I'm a fed. You know, I'm not. I don't pretend to be a fed.
Because you do
How
give the
shiny
talk
are
on
you?
disguises.
Yeah, I have taught classes on disguises. I have taught our feds. I've taught other countries spooks as well. But I myself was never a spook. I was never a fed. But I did apply to become one. And I got 2 job offers from 2 different groups. But yeah, that was like day 1 at UAT. It was like you sat down with the recruiter. It's like, okay, you want to work with the government? Great. This is what's called an FS86. Fill this out. I'm like, okay. And it's like, you know, the last 10 years of your life. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I called my uncle like the end of that week. I was like, oh, I think you're correct. I think you could get a job. And he's like, yeah, I know I'm correct. And he's like, don't fuck up. It's like, okay. So yeah, that's that was like early life going into transitioning into security, learning it was a job, right? Because like at my high school, they didn't really talk about security as a job, right? I didn't even want to go to college. The only reason why I went to college is because my girlfriend, who is now my wife, at that time in high school was like, I'm not going to date you if you don't go to college. I was like, okay. So I went to a junior college for like my first 2 years. Right.
That's one heck of an ultimatum.
Yeah. Well, at that time I already knew that we're going to get married. So like early on in our relationship, you know, there was a deciding factor.
Yeah.
She had like dual citizenship. So, you know, she asked me like, hey, are we going to get married or not? And I was like, yeah, we are. And I knew why she was asking that question, because at 18, she would have to choose, you know, to drop one of her citizenships. And if we're going to get married, she can't have a citizen. At that time, the role that I wanted was very restrictive on like who you would marry. And even if they had like dual citizenship, what that would do to your possibility of getting that role and stuff like that. So she dropped that. So we knew we were going to get married, right? But then she saw that I wasn't really interested in going into college, so she gave me that ultimatum.
Yeah.
I was
Either way,
I was going to buy an IT shop I was working for at that time, right? I was doing like network admin work for like Ford and GM in high school as a contract network admin through another company. I was just going to buy that company and get a loan to buy that company and then pay off that loan with the company revenue. And I'd already talked to the owner of that company about doing that. So, but the wife wanted me to go to college. So did that.
Well, it seems like it kind of worked out for you. So maybe she did some good there.
Yeah, it worked out. Mostly I married her. So that I think that was the best part of the deal. She tolerates my shenanigans.
All your Pelican boxes with all your RF gear everywhere. Just littering the hallway.
Yeah, they litter the garage now.
Racing around a big field, hitting little jumps in her car, and she's like, "Drivers hate my car!"
Yeah.
I imagine you've got lots and lots of radio gear. Like you probably got like an Edis research thing, like all the cool things that we can't afford.
So many.
I have some radio gear. Yeah, that is how I would describe it.
You got a USRP over there?
How humble.
Yes, I do have at least one USRP.
You've heard of it before.
But the USRP I consider like a hobbyist grade software-defined radio, right? It's not like a professional software-defined radio. And that's not the bag.
Half duplex or full duplex?
Well, I mean the USRPs are full duplex, right? So in fact, they're even more than that. They have multiple radios in them that you can use simultaneously to do things like MIMO and other beamforming stuff and whatnot. But the reason why, like I have the B series, right? So I have like a B205, I have a B210, I have a few B210s.
Oh, can I trade you for one? Because my B210, it's that weird one that doesn't have a case for it.
What do you consider
The
professional? grade?
whiteboard?
Yeah, I got the white one.
Yeah. It's like the OG. I'm not interested in that. I actually gave away my whiteboard B210. So
I need a green
you
one.
It was a good try there, Sledge. Good try. All right, let's move on to the core topic here. I do divert a bit.
To quickly answer David's question, what do I consider a professional software-defined radio? So for terms of things like, let's say, signals intelligence, right? So the receiving, we don't need to like transmit per se, but the receiving of information or of a signal, I would lean towards companies like ThinkRF, which make a great radio. They're out of Canada. I've met with their CTO, an extremely smart individual, really focused on the art of radio. And I do enjoy using their radio platforms. I have not personally bought one myself, but my clients have bought those radios, and that's what we use for various purposes. I have one here somewhere in a Pelican case, so it's a great professional software-defined radio, and its default configuration, its range is, it's, I forget what the bottom range is, but essentially like DC to 28 gigahertz, right? And then we have converters that allow us to go up to 60 gigahertz, usable with that. So
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Badass.
That's
Well,
but that's a much more expensive radio, right? Like,
yeah.
that's the thing. Once you get into like these higher end radios, it's no longer like you're just paying $2,500, right? Like
$2,500, right?
Yeah. It's like $28,000, and then it's like, oh, you want software? Great, that's another $25,000. So
Right.
like the software that we use with it is literally another $27,000 all in.
So you're not messing around.
You could buy a
with your
sports car
schematic and
or
diagrams.
Yeah, and then you have to pay it. So that 27, God, this is the worst part. You have to pay like a renewal license cost. So it's like $8K every year that you're paying after you buy in initially on that $27,000 price range, and then they send you like a new flash drive that gives you an updated key. And sometimes I think about cracking it, but I'm like, I like their software, I like the company.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name the company because now they know that I think about cracking their software sometimes.
I think I know which one that is.
But it's great software, and it works well with the ThinkRF. So when we're doing something like signals intelligence, and we have like 6 ThinkRFs going up around in an area, it allows us to do what we need to do very effectively, and I can rely on it. And I can deploy it remotely, and I know I can rely on it.
Oh, they should give you a referral fee for that one, right there.
All right. Yeah, they are not a sponsor.
Yet.
Yeah. Hey, ThinkRF, if you want to sponsor my YouTube channel, great. I'm down. Right. One of your competitors has already talked to me, but I don't like them as much as you, so I haven't agreed yet.
Sense of urgency, number 1 social engineering tool.
That's right.
So foundational steps, like getting back to the core topic, for somebody who's looking to start their own cybersecurity firm, what would you say like the most critical initial steps they should take, and how should they prioritize them?
Yeah, so the initial step is like actually have an offering that's worth being paid for. You're going to be competing against like 27,000 other consultancies in the US. What makes you 27,000 like security consultancies, right? What makes you unique? Like, why would someone go with you? What do you do better than others? And figure that out. Figure out what makes you unique. And your uniqueness can be something as lame, and I'm going to use this word lame, as you have contacts that other people don't have, right? So it doesn't mean you actually do anything better, right? You could totally suck and you could still do well because you have contacts that other people don't have. Sure, great. I think that would be a waste of, I think if you're going to run a consultancy, you should provide a value better than others. But but that might be your unique skill. You have access that others don't, right? But find what makes you unique, and then really decide, like, why is it that you want to start your own company? I had a person who I was talking to who was like, I want to start my own consultancy. I was like, great. Like, and this was years ago. Like, I was 4 years in or 3 years in starting my own consultancy. And I was like, great. Like, why do you want to start your own consultancy? And they're like, I'm working 80 hours a week. I was like, okay. And they're like, I don't want to do that. And I was just like, okay. When in your career do you not want to do that? And they're like, well, I want to start a consultancy and just, I want to be able to work 40 hours while making, charging. At that time, he wanted to charge like $250 an hour, right? And I was just like, okay, right. Yeah, don't open up a company. This is not for you. And he was like, well, why not? And I was just like, do you have a lot of money to like start your company right now? And he's like, no, I don't, which is fine. You don't need a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of money when I started mine. But he was very much like, yeah, I don't have a lot of money and I want to work 40 hours a week. Don't do it. If that is your motivation, don't do it at all. Because when you start your company, you need to dedicate as much time as possible. When I say as much time as possible, I don't mean like you dedicate 40 hours a week to it. And that's it, right? You need to dedicate it. Let's say you start your company and you're working another job, which is smart. You should do that unless you have a nest egg saved up and you could just jump into it, right? Or you have a client that's lined up and is already paying you before you start the project, right? And then you can roll that into something great. But most of the time you start your own company when you're working for someone else, right? That's smart. I recommend that for most people. But you work 40 hours, let's say, a week for that job. You need to work 60 hours on top of your 40 hours a week for your own company. So you're working 100-hour work weeks. How long do you do that for? For as long as you can take it. And if your company takes off and does well, great. If it doesn't, you just become another statistic of a failed small business, right? For the first 18 months of starting my company, I spent 100 hours a week working, if not more sometimes, right? I had already changed my sleep schedule at that time to be running off of 4 hours sleep. Some people can do that. Some people can't, right? I'm fortunate enough to be one of the ones that can do that and function normally throughout the day. I'm not saying it's a healthy option, but you're starting a company. We're not talking about health here. So starting a company is bad for your health. It's very stressful. But yeah, so if that's like your motivation, great. You want to if your motivation is you want to provide a unique value that someone wants, great. You need to find what that is. More importantly, you need to know what you want in life. Like, what is your end goal in life, right? And you need to see if a business actually aligns with that end goal. If your end goal in life is you just want to be able to do the minimum amount of work, get paid for it, and live on the beach, smoke weed, and play video games, running a business may not be your best option. I have a friend who's like that. He found that he could just be a developer. He literally works 2 hours a week, right? He's extremely talented at his job, and he has to solve the hard problems for this medical company. And that equates to, 2 to 4 hours a week that he's actually doing real work. And then all the other times he's just hanging out on the beach, smoking pot, playing video games. And that's what he wanted in his life, right? Running a company would not be for him. When you want to run a company, right, it's because you're wanting to make generational changes in your financial status maybe not for you, but for your kids or your grandkids and stuff like that, right? Like that was one of my reasons for starting a company was there's two reasons why I wanted to start a company. I wanted to, I like dabbling around with like business ideas and like trying them out in the real world and seeing what works and what fails, right? But that is not the best idea for most people because most people they like rely on their paychecks, right? If like at that time, if my company were to blow up, I literally knew that I could make a phone call and get a job in like that same day, right? So I kind of had that safety net planned out already. But if you want to, change, maybe you grew up poor or you grew up on right on that poor level, which is where I grew up, but I wanted to be able to take care of like my family and some of my very, very close friends financially. Great. Like that's a good life mission. Starting a business might be the right role for you, right? Doesn't mean that you have to start a business to do that, but that might be the right way. So figuring out what you add uniquely and then figuring out if starting a company aligns with your end life goal is really where I would start when it comes to starting a company. Because starting a company is not hard. Everyone's just like, oh, you got to do all this planning. No, you don't. You go to LegalZoom, okay? You start a company. You could even start it in the state that you're in. We don't have to get fancy. You don't have to start a business in Delaware or Wyoming or Nevada, right? You don't need to open up something and Cook Island or going overseas or doing anything crazy like that. You can go to LegalZoom. Again, not a sponsor. This is just an example. Pay $500, start your company outside if you're not in New York or California because they charge more. But start your company and you'll get a little paper. You'll get a little folder from LegalZoom. You'll get your EIN, which is your tax ID for the company. And then they'll be like, congratulations, you started a company, right? That's all it takes. It takes 30 minutes and $500. And then you get like a little binder right here, actually. This is what the binder looks like, right? So this is my YouTube channel that I just started, self-plug.
Nice.
But like $500, 30 minutes. That's how much it costs to start a company, right? It's not intense. There's not a whole bunch of stuff that you have to worry about and whatnot. And then the next thing you have to do is you get a website up, right? Don't know how to build a website? Cool. Go to Wix, right? If you can drag and drop, perfect. Don't know what to say on your website? That's okay. ChatGPT that shit, right? I offer consulting services in the security space. Please make my website sound generic as fuck. And ChatGPT will do a great job like pushing that out for you, right? And then you can do all that. You don't even need technical skills, which you should have technical skills if we're doing security consulting. But I'm just saying in general, right? It's not difficult today. Like it's way easy today. You don't need to know how to make a website. You can drag and drop and make your own website with something like Wix or whatever.
Or you can pay Evelyn to make you a website.
Very few times does your website bring you organic business. It's something to validate you when other people are doing their cursory, checks, right?
Yeah. I actually had someone that I know who was wanting to be a new client look at my website and they're like, there's not a lot of information on this website. There used to be a lot more information. I was like, you're right, there was. I hated that. So like, I have my website is extremely bare. But that's because where I'm at in my career right? Where I'm at in life, I can pick the projects I want to work on, and I don't want to work on a lot of projects. So I'm extremely picky. So my website doesn't need to be all flashy, have like 10 billion pages on it. I'm not trying to IPO or anything like that, right? Red Mesa's done well enough to where I don't care about any of that. So, but I also don't have it to where I have to like upkeep this huge behemoth of a company. We'll talk about that probably later, right? Like, what do you do when you want to exit? Right? Like, you're like, wow, I may not have to work anymore. or I just have to work very minimally so I can pay for health insurance. Which is why you want to. So I'll give you this tip, kind of jumping ahead. When you start your own company, if you don't have someone else's health insurance to be on, you're going to learn paying for health insurance sucks. You're going to be paying thousands of dollars a month for your health insurance, and it's terrible. So, you just got to work a little bit to cover the $30,000 it costs per year for health insurance, right? Or 24,000 or whatever it is. So yeah, it's it doesn't take that much effort to start a company. Just look, what state do you live in? I live in Georgia. Great. Start your company in Georgia, right? LegalZoom again. It's very simple. People make it seem like it's very difficult. And the other thing you need to do is like, you can start your company, but you don't have to be transacting as your company right away. So start your company right now. Start building up like your portfolio that you can show someone, right? And then go and actually transact and try to get clients.
So how do you differentiate your services from like the larger, more established firms? Like what strategies have you found effective where you can attract the clients that you want, not just random clients?
Well, okay, let's talk about this. This is the reality of starting your own company. When you first start your company, bro, I'm not gay, but $20 is $20, right? So like you do all the shit work. My first one of my first contracts I got with Red Mesa, I was doing firewall reviews for like, I don't know, like $60 an hour, right? It was garbage work. I hated every minute of it. But you got to do it. Like that's what's paying the bills right now, right? I'm reviewing these dumbass firewall rules. Boo-hoo, suck it up. Who cares? You're having to do that what we call in the industry pay for gay, right? Some people may not like that in today's terms, but it is what the business world has called it for many decades. But it is the shit work that you don't want to do, but you will do it because you're running a consultancy. And as I joke with people, what is running a consultancy? Well, I'm just a cybersecurity hooker, basically, right? Whoever is willing to pay my hourly rate, I will work with them. Not really anymore, but
as long
that's
as it's
how
legal.
it was in the beginning, right? Yeah. As long as it's legal, or if they're paying like an obscene amount of rate, maybe you don't mind if it's not illegal, right? But what is legal, right? Some people think some things are legal, some things aren't, right? A judge will determine that. Or if you have a client that has a .gov at the end of their URL, right? Lots of more things become legal.
Don't ask too many questions. Yeah.
But yeah, so with that, you got to do that grueling work. You take anything that you can get. So all that crappy web app pen testing work that it's absolute trash to do, you go do it, right? All that dumb writing policies or reviewing policy work, you go do that. And those might be things that people are really excited about, right? I'm not trashing on it. They're just not exciting to me. But that's what you got to do, right? Is all this work that is severely underpaid, terrible. The clients are terrible to work with, but that's just the reality of starting your company, right? You get all that out, but you're paying bills. So it doesn't matter, right? You're still surviving. Your company is surviving. And that's what you do in the beginning is like you're in survival mode. And that's what I did with mine, right? Is like I did the bullshit work. So, and there were times where, I had like a client that was like 12 months late paying me. And like, I already had to pay all my guys. So like I took another bullshit contract. And this is like the early days of my company. I took a bullshit contract so that I could like make sure that I could pay my own bills and then continue, right? Because that's the one thing you always make sure you pay your guys on time
First.
and you deal with the consequences of that afterwards. So like I took another bullshit it was like an architectural review job that paid like $65 an hour or something like that, so I can pay my other personal bills and stuff like that. So
You ever notice like law firms always pay like it takes forever to get them to pay properly? Like I've had really bad luck with them when I've done work for them that it's like months later, and then there's always like some issue where it's going to be another thing, at least in my experience.
yeah, I haven't had too much problem with law firms. The only problems I had a problem with the utility before. And how you can kind of get around that is you can charge like a third of your price up front. So as soon as they sign the PO, you send an invoice for that 1/3 up front, right? And then I had a problem with a crypto company before. They were a crypto exchange. Our report caused them to shut down. Well, our report caused their backers, all their investors, to leave. And then the company shut down. I did not know that was happening. I'm still on very good terms with their executives. They don't hate me, even though it was my report that kind of killed their exchange.
Well, at least they got a report.
Yeah, they got a report. It was a pretty crazy report. It was basically like, oh, hey, all this security infrastructure that you built, yeah, it's garbage. And it shut down the crypto company or the exchange, which was pretty crazy because it was one of the larger exchanges at that time in the crypto world for the region that it was focused on. But they took forever. They took like, I forget how long they took. Forever. So much so I was like, I'm just going to release your report. And not that it really would matter because they're already shutting down. But the CTO was just like, no. Drew, like, I'll pay. And it wasn't even that much, right? It was like $18,000. And they're like, I'll pay. And I was like, thanks. Like 13, 18, I don't know how long it was. But yeah. And then I had a utility who was slow to pay. And that was total bullshit. Whoever their billing department is, fuck you. But yeah,
Could you just flip the breakers in their office? No, shut up.
yeah, I haven't done that.
Give them a free phishing assessment to their billing department.
Yeah, no.
What do you mean?
Twist
You
the
already
valve
paid me.
outside. Shut down the water.
I do have in some of my contracting, and some clients will be more pushy on it than others. We do have a line that says like, if you don't pay us within this certain amount of time, like we can, you don't own your report. That's like what we put in there. You don't own your report until you pay us. And we can then sell your report or your findings to like the highest bidder if you don't pay us to recoup our cost, right? Not everyone agrees to that. Sometimes we take it out.
Add that into mine. I like that.
Yeah. A lot of people. Oh no, a lot of people are going to cause a fight with that. It's our second most contentious part in our agreements that we have. Our
It's
first
a good way
most
to make sure they
contentious
pay,
one.
though.
Oh yeah. It's great. They're just like, we can't do this, and I was like, do you guys? Are you not going to pay? Because this doesn't matter if you don't pay. I mean, like, why does it matter?
It's a good way to make sure they're actually reading the contract and not just blindly signing.
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of like Fortune 100 companies, so they all read the contracts very, very closely.
What's your most contentious?
Our travel policy.
Okay.
My travel policy is very skewed towards the consultant. So we're gonna have to fly more than 4.5 hours. Great, first class or overseas business class, right? We choose the hotel that's most convenient to us. We will choose the mode of transportation that's most convenient for us. And yeah, if you want us to, if you do not want for us to take a direct flight to there, because there was one client there just like, well, we don't pay for direct flights. I was just like, that's totally fine. Like, I get that. I will bill you for every hour that I start traveling and any of my consultants that start traveling. So the second we walk out that door to start traveling to your site, we're billing you for it. And they agreed to that. I was like, okay. And then they got a travel bill for like $20,000. And they're like, what the hell? And I was like, you agreed to it. Like, And they changed it. They allowed direct flights after that project. We had to change the MSA, Master Service Agreement, and all that stuff. And they agreed to our travel policy. So that's the most contentious thing. In fact, my first big client, I remember, was my first six-figure fix at that time, what I considered a big project, but it was my first like six-figure project, right? Their lawyers or whoever, their lawyers were on there, but they also had another group that was on this phone call negotiating these contract stuff. And they're like, we can't agree to your travel policy. And I was like, oh, that's totally fine. Like, I get that. And they're like, okay, cool. So we'll scratch these parts out. And I was like, oh, no, we're not working. Like, we're not working with you. And they're like, what? And they knew I was a super small consultancy, right? It was just myself at that time. And I was like, yeah. Like, that's fine. Like, I get it. Not everyone is ready to transact with a premium consultancy. I can give you recommendations for like some grade B consultancies that probably are more your speed, if that's what you want. And these people are so dumbfounded that like this cocky asshole was just like, no, fuck you. You're going to pay for my travel policy. And their problem was the first class amendment in our travel policy. Like, we don't pay first class for anyone. And I was just like, okay, that's fine. They do now pay for first class for us, and they have paid first class multiple times for us because they are far away from us. And they love it, right? They've loved everything. And the reason why I designed the travel policy is not because I like flying first class, right? It's like, oh, I don't fucking care. Commercial, right? But it is designed for the consultant. So everything in Red Mesa is designed for the consultant. So we have like these 10 why can't I even think of the name? 10 tenets of Red Mesa. The first tenet is make tons of money, give lots of it away, right? The second tenet of the company is good consultants are harder to come by than good clients. And so everything that we do is designed around the consultant. And I tell them, our travel policies might seem extreme, but I promise you, you're going to get better work out of the consultant if we're able to do this. And our consultants will be well rested when they're on site with you. They'll be able to perform, hit the ground running if you're far away and stuff like that. There's not going to be any like lag time. You're not going to have a overworked, overstressed consultant working on your project. Or at least we're not going to be overworking in them and overstressing them. They might be overworked and overstressed for another reason, right? But not because of us. And it's worked out really well. Like the clients do see the benefit of our travel policy on there. It's the most contentious thing. I argue about it literally in every single one of our negotiations. And the only time I ever folded on it was for a company that literally was 5 minutes away from our office. I could walk to their office, and I was like, okay. Then they only had one office, right?
Get a limo.
So it's not like we were ever going to have to travel far. And all the work that they didn't do any on-site work. It was always all remote, right? And that was their thing, is like, we don't want anyone on site. I was like, great, I don't want to be on site anyway. So it's all remote work. So I was like, okay, the travel policy doesn't really matter in this case. Like, they already have guaranteed me all remote work. And they said, like, my point of contact, who is now a friend of mine, I was like, if we ever have you come on site, like, we'll do your travel policy, but we can't. It's going to be a sticking point right now, but everything's remote, so it doesn't matter. And yeah, everything's always been remote with them, so it doesn't matter. That's the only time I've ever folded on it, is because you were 5 minutes away from our office. I literally could walk to the hangar that your office is in from my office building, right? So
that is a great answer to that question, by the way. I want to move on to the next part here. You said earlier that it's really important to have people with like different skills, having a strong network of people who you can rely on.
Yeah.
How do you build like a strong network of people that you can rely on?
Yeah. You have to go talk to people, right? You have to network. You have to be able to determine if someone has skill or not. So you have to go and see what type of work product they have. And you also have to remember that some people have bad days, right? So, something may not be on the up and up. You just have to pick up the slack if that's the case on that particular item. Hopefully, it doesn't happen again. If it does, you just never use them again. But yeah, going out and networking, finding other people who are interested in doing work, find the work that people are interested in doing. So don't put someone who's really interested in compromising Windows, Active Directory environments on a mobile web app pen test or a mobile pen test, right? That's not what they're interested in. So like find what they're interested in and then like put them on those projects. But you don't find those people until you actually go out and talk to people, right? So whether that's at conferences, at meetups, wherever, but actually like physically meet the people as well. Because not everyone can be a consultant. And that's because not everyone can be client facing, right? There are just some people who, for a load of different reasons, just are terrible client facing. They might be great researchers, but you just never would put them in front of a client. So like make sure there's someone that you would want to be in front of your client, because you're not always going to be there on the project, right? You're not always going to be working. Especially if you're trying to build a consultancy to like a normal business, you're going to be running the business aspect of it, right? You're not always going to be the one hacking. I love hacking. I like doing business as well. So I get to do both in my own company because I write the paychecks. So when my salespeople are like, oh, you need to be on the golf course selling more stuff, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm going to be breaking into this building next week instead. So what you need to like know, because if you're building a traditional company, there's going to be a time where you're no longer interfacing with the client at all, right? And there was a time at Red Mesa where I wasn't talking to the client at all, right? Like I'd be on maybe a kickoff call, or maybe I'd pop in for 20 minutes at like an outbrief, but I had a PM or the consultants like dealing with all the other stuff, right? The business dev person dealing with all this, and I wasn't really interfacing all that much. So make sure that these people can be client facing and they can represent your company well. So yeah, doing that in person is the best way to do it, and knowing, are they someone of integrity? Can you count on them? Stuff like that. That's what you need to like really look for. But that's all done building that network. It's done in person, going to conferences, working with people throughout the industry, hanging out with them outside of the workspace. So yeah.
Very well put, man. When it comes to like finding these kind of people who you can rely on, who have integrity, who are not going to embarrass you in front of a client, do you think just spending time with somebody in person and hanging out with them and maybe then interacting with them online is usually going to be enough to kind of ensure that you've got a good enough feel for a person? Or have you ever come across maybe a consultant who looked like they'd be great on paper, you spent some time interacting with them, and then when you sent them out into the field, they were not as talented when it came to maybe some of the social aspects of having to interact with people, maybe on an in-person pen test, for example, having social anxiety they hadn't told you about before, or choking up when it came time to implement a plan where they're doing a physical engagement on like a building. Have you ever like run into that kind of scenario?
Yeah. On the physical side, no. On the general consulting side, yes. Which is why I also add a step of talk to other people that have worked with them beforehand, right? At the very beginning, I wasn't doing that, but now I do that, where I talk to other people that have seen their work product, before. So that's how you could do it, is you talk to other people that you trust in the industry that knows this person and has worked with them before, and they could tell you the quirks of the people, right? I had someone, the best web app hacker I ever knew in my life, super talented on the technical side. What did he sucked at? He sucked at like time management and keeping his eye on the ball. So I just had to take more of a PM type role when I'm working on projects with him, right? Be like, hey, you know, you don't need to go to the micromanage point of it, but just being like, hey, these are tasks for today. These are what we're looking to get done. Let me know when you get done with them today, and I'll give you the new task for tomorrow. And so being more up on them, right? And I was fine with doing that because they just absolutely ripped through web apps. And
Your typical web app sec guy, just like really only into web apps, nothing else, like app sec sexual, and
yeah,
all I do is
yeah,
web apps.
yeah. I mean, the guy was so good that like Google was coming to him for like advice on certain things, right? Like all the time, they'd be like, "We want to hire you," and he'd always be like, "I don't want to work for you."
That was a good call on his part.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. He died, so I don't know.
Oh.
But
Hopefully Google
yeah.
didn't kill him.
No. And he wasn't a Boeing whistleblower either. But yeah, it's like I just knew I had to be more up on managing him and the project, right? So that wasn't a
So you
bad
had to
thing.
take that PM role on. You had to be constantly interacting with him, being like, hey, have you met these goals so far? What are you doing right now?
Before I had a PM, like I would have to PM with them. And mostly even my PM, that I have, the PM actually more PMs me than the consultants. Though he'll PM the consultants as well. But yeah, finding someone who has worked with that person before can really tell you a lot of things, and that's how I knew that this person needed to be more hands-on on the PM side than hands-off. Right? They weren't someone that I could just be like, okay, this is your goal. You have 3 weeks to do this project. Like, let me know when you're done, type of thing. Right? And I do have consultants that are like that. That where I can just be like, here you go, whatever. You got 3 weeks
And
to
you
do
know
this
that
project.
you don't really need to manage them because they're able to self-manage, whereas other people kind of need that bit of what are you doing?
Right.
How's it coming along?
And I wouldn't know that if I didn't talk to someone that they've worked with beforehand. So
right.
Yep. But yeah, I have
So
ran on that. On the physical side,
that's-
I have not ran on that though, because I am there are certain characteristics that I look for on someone that's going to be doing physical entry. And I'm extremely picky on like what those people are. So I haven't ran on that, but I have ran it on the digital side, right? Because once we break into the building,
kind of guy who's got a belt that's got an under the door tool built into it, like that kind of guy, it's not going to F up on a physical.
No. Because they could still, just because you could buy a toy, right, or just because you make something doesn't mean that you're going to do well on a physical. Especially the physicals that we're doing, which are way higher end than that, right? Like where I was just doing a physical where if you didn't do a successful under the door attack within a period of time, which these cameras, it was like 6 seconds, 6 or 7 seconds or something like that. They would pick up, they have this AI in them that would pick up that like, hey, someone is trying to make entry into this door, right?
Wow.
So you have to, just because someone can have an under the door tool in their belt doesn't mean that they can actually make entry fast enough, right? Or they may not even look like they fit in.
Yeah.
They may not fit in the area that they're breaking into, right? So if we're breaking into a government facility, I need them to look like a government employee. I need them to act like it. I need them to know the lingo, the wording, or anything like that, right? As same as if they're breaking into a tech company, right, in Silicon Valley, they need to know how to
Got
look
to
and
be able
act
to
like
live
a
their
tech employee.
pretext.
Right. But I'm also hypercritical on the skill sets that I want when someone is making physical entry. And there's
So
been
what is
times.
the core skill set you're looking for outside of the knowledge of how to pick a lock, which honestly, I don't think I've ever had to do on a physical, honestly. But
Yeah.
like just your general, like what's the skill set you would look for?
I want the person who I can show them a building and they know that they're confident they're going to make it entry, right? I want the person that looks at, a military base and they're just like, yeah, I know how I'm going to make entry in this. Like I got 7 ways to make entry into this military base right now. So there's been times where like I'll drive up to a building and it'll just be a random building. I'll be like, tell me how you're breaking into this building. Like, just give me your best guess, right? And I don't know how to break into that building either, right? I'm also doing my assessment at the same time. And I want them to understand like what it is that they have to do, but also understand because when we're breaking into buildings, sometimes we're asked to emulate a particular threat actor, right? So, the Asian governments, China and stuff like that, will do physical entry differently than a European company or a European group that is doing espionage, right? So I want them to also understand how those different groups work and can they simulate and act that out? Can they do that well? Are they okay working in the extreme cold, long hours, and or the extreme heat, right? We've done physical break-ins when it was 118 degrees outside. It's terrible, but it's whatever. And usually when it gets to that stage where it's like 118 degrees or like when it's -6 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm there with the guys. I'm not telling them just go do it themselves, right?
In oven mitts so you don't get burned by the door handles.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'll be there with those guys, suffering with them, so that they can see like, oh yeah, Drew hired us, so he didn't have to be outside. Nope, I'm there with you guys. But yeah, the confidence, the ability to understand. I want to know how they find exploits into locks. Right, there's a process that I look for in there.
So you're not just looking somebody who's going to rake it with a Bogota. You're looking for somebody who really knows their shit.
Well, not just that. Yeah, because there are times where we're asked not to leave the minimum amount of forensic evidence possible. So we can't rake, right? Because raking leaves a ton of forensic evidence inside the lock. So that won't work, right? I need you to know another way to get through this particular mechanism. And with our physicals, we don't rely on social engineering. So all our we'll have social engineering in there, and that we'll have to interface with people, but we don't rely on that as the primary method to get entry. Or if that's how we got initial access, we always go back and get another way to make entry into that place that requires zero interaction with people to show the weakness on the actual physical site instead of showing a weakness in personnel.
Yeah, you're looking for a mindset, right? Or a particular like way of thinking. Like the guy has, a cutaway lock of the lock the client has on the door at his home, and he's figuring out how to bypass it, or what.
Yeah.
That type of thing, right?
Like that's the level that they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
And they don't need to know that particular bypass. I'll teach them the bypass, right? But I want them to be developing their own bypasses, be able to find bypasses and locking systems, because they're going to have to be able to think on their feet while we're doing an engagement, especially in a commercial engagement where we don't have like a commercial red team project where we don't have unlimited time, or it's not like a long-term project, right? We might only have 2 weeks to be able to break into this 1 million square foot facility, and there's 6 different areas inside the facility that we need to get into, and that's a lot of stuff that we got to cover in 2 weeks.
So not necessarily someone with like an encyclopedic knowledge of like, oh, I know, every model of every,
I mean, that's great.
magnetic door lock, whatever, right?
But
more
what happens
on their
when they
feet.
get what happens when
Come
they're
across
breaking
something.
into what happens when they're breaking into a building and they get approached by a police officer or they get approached by security, right? There's all these other things that I
You
need to
definitely
let them
run.
know. Yeah, definitely run. Yeah, do not run.
You'll get tased.
And
Yeah, don't do that.
we've had police pull up on our engagements before, right? So I want to, and we interface with security on almost every single one of our engagements. Sometimes we make a point to interface with security when we're breaking into places.
Have you ever gone in as security?
We have not gone in as security. We have gone in as employees before. We've actually done an engagement where we got hired onto the company. So like I had to go get hired. I had to go through their interview process, get hired in the company, and then go start our engagement. Which if you ever do that, make sure you have it clear in your paperwork that if you do the tasks that you're there to get hired to do, so let's say you're a marketing person, right? And you do marketing crap for them, you still get to keep your W-2 paycheck that they gave you and the consulting rate that you're charging, right? But first time I did that, we did not solidify that stuff in the contracting language. So their accounting team was just like, well, we already paid this guy like this amount of money, like we're just going to take it off our project. And I was like, no, I did your dumb projects as well. Like I delivered deliverables for that. And we made an agreement. We came to terms on that. But the next time I did it, I was just like, all right, if I have to deliver stuff for this project, like you're going to pay me for the times I have to deliver things, as well as you're going to pay me while I'm on site. And some of them are like, oh, okay, yeah, like we'll do that. Or some of them like, well, we don't want to pay you for that. So like get the job, get in, or like get through the interview process, get an offer, and then we'll go and we'll stop that process. We'll tell them, you send them an email being like, oh, sorry, I took an offer with someone else, but show that you could actually get in that way. And then we'll give you access as that type of person into the company afterwards. So you could just be focusing on doing that. Right. So
what's the typical scope on an engagement like that? Like once you're in and you're doing the work, are you then, trying to actually compromise AD and stuff from your your work computer, or are you?
Yeah. So we're compromising their network. We're compromising controls that they have on like their laptop. So if they don't allow people to install applications, we're trying to get around that stuff. We're seeing what we can put on that laptop that alerts their SOC versus what doesn't alert their SOC. Get around, their different different security models that they might have, or get around their different clients that are installed on the box that are reporting out to the SOC, get into areas in the building that we're not supposed to have access to, take stuff out of the building. There's a client where they did bag scans going into the building and they did bag scans going out of the building. And it was a very high-end research place that did they're a well-known company, but they have like a very niche research area. And they're just making sure you weren't taking any company IP out of the building, right? So they wanted us to they're like, hey, we have essentially a trinket, we'll call it, right? It wasn't any real research that they were working on. But they're like, we're going to consider this company IP. We want it to come out of the company. So bring us this predetermined item that you know what it is. So we're not actually bringing out their real research into the real world. And show us that you can do that, right? Get it through our bag scanners and stuff like that. So it'll be, in that particular case, it was a PCB board that looked like it had a functional use to it, but it was just like one of their engineers' hobby projects that he was working on. But we used it as our flag to get out of the building. And it was in a metal case and all these things, right? So we had to be able to get it through the bag scanners. So we took it out of the metal case, right? We did a few different things to get it around the bag scanners. But that was like one of the scopes, is like be able to do that for the project, right? Be able to compromise it as an insider. And that's what they're looking for. And that's one of our specialties, is compromising companies as an insider.
Badass. I did not even realize that was a service you offered. Pacer actually has some stuff he'd like to contribute here.
Well, no, I have a question for Drew.
Oh.
One of the hardest things that I know a lot of people who try to start their own consultancy struggle with is hiring that first employee and maintaining sort of a client development. Like, how do you get, when you're small, right, and you have maybe a handful of consistent clients, how do you build that? Like, how do you take that, transition that into the next stage?
Yeah, so you're now hiring on your first employee. It depends on what like your first employee hire is going to be, right? Like my first hire was someone that do QA, because I absolutely suck at writing English, right? So I need someone to be able to QA my reports. So that was like the first person I hired. And they're not client facing, but they're like looking at my reports. That first thing, hiring your first employee, is super stressful. And your first employee, all your employees usually take a while to hire, but especially your first employee, you really need to take a while to hire them.
Do you work with them as a contractor first?
If I don't work with them, not always. I don't have to work with them as a contractor. They have to have people that I know in the industry that have worked with them, right?
Okay. I guess my question is more, once you have the burden of, now I have this ongoing expense and this burn rate, how do you sustain that if your consistent projects are kind of spread out? And then
yeah. What you're talking about, so the phenomenon that David's talking about is called feast or famine. And it's like this cycle that you run through in a consultancy a lot of times. If you're just providing
Exactly.
like penetration testing or IR or whatever services, right? And you don't have a product to tie to it, or another offering that's not really focused on consulting. How do you like make sure that you have the finances to support that during that feast and famine cycle? And that's the scary part, because there is no one right answer. There's no silver bullet for that, right? What I did is, when I had an employee, I had like half their salary, if not all their salary, saved up for that whole year already before I hired them, right? And that's how I did it, just because I'm super risk averse. That's not like the best way to always grow a business. And that's the thing. That's the other thing. My experience for how to do this, like I could teach you how to take your cybersecurity consulting company to like 8 figures, but I don't know what it's like to run a 9-figure consultancy, because I've never done it, right? I don't know how to teach you how to become a billionaire, because I'm not a billionaire, right? So like I don't have all the answers on that. And the way I approach business worked for me and how like my risk schedule is set up. But it may not work for you, and it may not be fast enough for you. So just remember that, right? Like I don't have all the answers. I can only tell you to like get to the stage that I got to. And I could tell you the mistakes I made along the way. But that's what I did. Like my first employee that I had, I had saved up money to make sure that I had the amount that I could bring on them for their salary, right? And there's other expenses that you have with employees, because once you have employees, they want health benefits, right? And other things. So you got to like factor those into your items. And as a company, you have to pay at a minimum 50% of your employees' health benefits, right? So at Red Mesa, what we did is, if you were single and you didn't have like kids and a wife and all the whole family thing going on, we would pay like 100% of your health insurance. If you had a family, we would pay like 60% of the entire cost for the entire family, not just for the employee, right? And that's just because we had some people, they had like 4 kids. That's a lot to pay. So even if they have 1 kid and they have like health issues, that's still a lot to pay, right? Like I had a buddy who I wanted to bring on, but his health insurance amount because he has a ton of like different pre-existing conditions, and like, you know, health insurance companies aren't supposed to deny you health insurance for that, and they won't. They just make you pay for it. It was going to cost a crazy amount to where like I couldn't afford his salary and paying that on top of that for him, right? So it just wasn't going to work out for us, and it sucked because he's a very great guy and he's super smart. Um, but but he totally understood, right? Like he actually brought it up as like this might be a problem in the beginning. But yeah, so saving up that cost to do that. The other thing that you could do is you might, once you have your employee, you might have to go back and take those lame ass, you know, $60 an hour things to make sure that you can pay for your employees or anything like that, right? So
to fill in the gaps of the cycle, right?
Yeah.
To that end, when you're getting started, right, sort of before you have the things rolling, have you had any like projects go sideways or been so close to the edge where it's like, have you ever had to deal with like being the, you know, how you were talking about earlier, how, you know, sometimes you get trouble getting paid with clients. Have you ever been so close to the edge that you couldn't roll over and like?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
How do you deal with
that? You start reaching out and be like, what work do people need me to do, right? You have to start planning things out. Like, okay, I could put these expenses. I can't put payroll on my credit cards, but I could put these other expenses on my credit card, and you know, I could now get essentially a micro loan for 27%. You know, interest or whatever. Right. And I don't recommend doing that. I don't recommend what you don't want to do. And the only times I ever did that, like I had money that was supposed to be coming in.
It was short term.
It was just super short term, right? Like, do not take debt for operations, which is another tenet of Red Mesa, right? Do not take on debt for operations like that. So don't go out and get a loan for your bank, right? And I had friends that did that during like COVID, especially. They went and got loans so that they could like continue running their company. Super fucking stupid. Like, don't do that.
I had that happen during COVID when it first hit. I was working over at Atlas, and they're like, we can't afford to pay you since we don't have as much stuff coming in, but what we can do is go get this PPP loan. You're not going to have to pay it back and just keep coming to work. And I went with it.
Yeah, we didn't take so we didn't take any of the PPP loan stuff during COVID as Red Mesa. Even though they're like, oh, they're going to be grants and stuff. Nope. We didn't do any of that, right? So you can look us up if you want to like check me out on this. There's like a PPP loan look up Red Mesa, and you'll see there's nothing there. And if there is, let me know where that check is, because I fucking haven't cashed it yet. But yeah, so you just need, as the business owner, you need to figure out what you need to do to make that work, right? So that's taking on other things to get around that. But what you should be doing is you should be trying to figure out how you can have a more consistent path so you don't have that feast and famine cycle. And what you can do with that is have clients on retainer, right? Or have some type of product offering that's not one-to-one billing for hours to money. And that's really what you should be doing in your consultancy in total. Like, one of our things that we do is we've helped multiple companies start their internal red team, right? We do not bill that at a 1-to-1 hour rate. So, you know, our normal rate that we charge is $350 to essentially like $500 an hour, depending on the work that we're doing, right? And it does go down to $250 an hour, depending on what you want us to do. And it can spike up, right? We've been paid ridiculous sums of money before to do work. So per hour. And that's great. You just don't always get those type of projects. Sometimes that means you have to don on the body armor when you're now doing your entry, but offer a product that doesn't require that one-to-one billing hours. So like building an internal red team doesn't require the one-to-one billing hour type, because it's essentially a product that you're selling is the book really, and the training that you're offering to give to the individuals so that they can build their red team, and you're helping them build their red team, right? You're bringing people on and stuff like that. And if you're doing that recruitment stuff, you get a bonus based off of those people coming on and whatnot. So,
Okay.
Yeah. Outside of that, there's always going to be a period where you're going to be like, holy shit, if I do this can really stress me out. And like, you just have to make the decision, is it worth trying to do that? And everything could come crashing down and burn. And that's what I always tell people. They're like, oh, how's your work doing? How's the business doing? I'm like, it's doing okay today. Ask me again in 6 months. And that's always the response I give. It's like, ask me again in 6 months.
Have you ever been, in the beginning when you were getting started, have you ever had to like put things on pause and sort of suspend operations to like make sure that you could make it until your next?
No, once I started doing Red Mesa full time, no. There was one thing where in the very beginning, I did work for a different company when I was starting Red Mesa. And that was because they were a consultancy, over 200 people that were privately owned and not owned by investors. They weren't looking to IPO, and they weren't owned by venture capitalists or private equity. There we go. Not venture capitalists, private equity. So I wanted to know how that was going to work out. And so, I was very excited. I told them, like, I want to learn from you all. So, like, I was going to be learning from the VP and the CEO. I also told the CEO, like, I want to learn from you. And he was very kind and was able to set up some meetings. And our very first meeting that we were going to have, he died like the day before. So I was like, oh, okay, let's see how this goes. And then they got bought out by private equity. And I was like, okay, peace out. Like, I'm just going to do Red Mesa full time. I'm not going to have this learning experience of what I wanted. But ever since then, no, I haven't put a pause on operations. It doesn't mean that you might not run into that situation. But I've been fortunate enough to where I haven't had to put a pause on it. I've been able to run it full time, and it's been my sole source of income. And it's actually helped me fund other companies without having to take on additional like W-2 work.
Okay. We'll loop back around.
But we had someone named Pacer, I think, say something. Sorry.
He was talking about me.
Oh, okay. I see. Your all's face is right here. I have my computer screen right here, so I can't see your all's face and names and stuff. So I'm looking straight into the lens.
Right. Yeah.
and then I have my little screen that's over here that I look into sometimes. So, but yeah.
So, Drew, you've been in this game for a while. You've probably seen a lot of different things over the years. How do you think the future landscape is changing nowadays? Like, what are the new trends? What are the things that are different from when you first started that are like where the future is going here in our industry?
Yeah. So Red Mesa is primarily a offensive focused company, right? I would not necessarily start a consultancy focused just on that in today's age, right? I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you start a consultancy. Maybe start a product company. But if you're dead set on starting a consultancy, right, then just know that there's certain things that are going to be more in vogue. So at the time when I was starting Red Mesa, red teaming and the new term that just came out in 2015, purple teaming, was like really big, right? So like we're able to jump on that bandwagon, and everyone wanted to have a red team. So I was like, I will help you build your red team. and we will charge you all the dollars for it, and you will have a successful red team. And we're able to do that, right? So we charge a lot of money to help a company start a red team, and help quite a few companies start a red team. And it worked out really well. And some of those red teams are doing very, very well. One of those red teams was fully laid off because that's what that company decided to do. And they then regretted that decision fairly quickly afterwards. And I don't know if they have a red team anymore. They have my booklet on how to build a red team and all my instruction videos on that. But that was the in thing at that time. So I was able to really see that that's where the market was going, and I jumped onto that. If I were to do a consultancy today, IR, like I don't do any IR work right now because I don't like the idea of like wanting my clients to get hacked.
Right.
But like IR, oh my God, everyone's going to get hacked. You're always going to have that employee that clicks the ransomware email and it gets popped, or there's going to be a box out there that's not secure and it's going to get popped with ransomware. Great. IR is great. Intelligence, doing like not like real intelligence, right? Like you don't need to know the military movements of another country and provide that to a company. Doing like open source intelligence or like threat hunting as a service, like those would be good things, right? Peer pen testing, I don't think would be the route that I would go though. People want to learn how to defend more things. So if you can offer a consultancy that is actually doing the defending part, not like a don't open up like a MSSP, because that is a race to the bottom. And then that's the other thing. Don't start a consultancy where they're in a race to the bottom right now. And that's kind of where like MSSPs or MSPs, that's where they've been at for a while. They're like a race to the bottom. They're like, how cheap can we get this service, right? Don't do that, right? Get into a business where it is more of a higher end offering, right?
Yeah.
And because you don't want to do race to the bottom.
Premium,
right? Super premium, right? Where when you charge $350 an hour, it is considered a deal. Which we have some clients that literally think us charging them $350 an hour is the steal of the century. And I was like, cool, right? I'm going to move you up to our next tier of payments, $500 an hour. And they're like, yeah, that's more in line with like what we're used to, right? And we're not big, so we're, our initials aren't Ernst & Young or Deloitte, so we're not charging $1,000 an hour for a PM or to deliver a PowerPoint that actually does nothing to your organization, but you get happy that you paid for it. So I think I feel pretty good charging $350 to $500 an hour, and my clients also think they get a good value from that at that range as well. Now I'm extremely picky on the work that we're taking, right? So I'm not taking any work for any project anymore. So I feel good about that as well, because I get to have fun still. And the work that we do is very interesting, but it's not something that I have to focus on 100% of the time. So yeah, find something. I don't know what the next like big thing was. I know it was red teaming at the time that I started Red Mesa, right. And that's what I really wanted to focus on, is that the full spectrum red teaming, whether that's helping them build a red team, helping them build a purple team, or they already have a red team and they need integration with their SOC so they can have a purple team, really doing that, right? So
yeah, for the people watching this who are foolish enough to jump in and start a consultancy, do you have recommendations on how they can focus on like client development or getting new clients? That's a hard one, right?
Yeah,
can be.
Yeah, it definitely can be. If you have like a good reputation around yourself in the industry already, that's great. You can like transact with that. But like use your network that you have and start asking them like, hey, do you have any projects that you think like this is what we do really well? Give them your top 3 things that you do really well, things that you think you can do better than anyone else, right? So like I'll give you an example. I believe that I can do a physical engagement and with the people that I have that I can use for physical engagement better than anyone else. I legitimately believe that we offer top-in-class entry for customers. And I can say that because, for a while I was training a lot of people. So I was the person they were learning entry from. But I feel like we could do that, and we have done it for very, very high-end security places, right? Where you would think it would be very difficult to break in. I'm not saying we've broken into Fort Knox, but everyone uses Fort Knox as like the gold tier for like
The
security,
gold
right?
standard,
Yeah.
ironically.
Yeah. There's no gold in there.
Not a Trojan.
But they use like, oh yeah, like we're locked down like Fort Knox, and I'm just like, yeah, Fort Knox is actually not that hard to break into. So I hope your security is a little bit better than that. And they're like, oh shit, okay. We've gotten into like some really high end places where other teams have failed before, and we just stomped all over that place. So I feel very confident. So if someone's just like, yo, what is your like number one thing where you feel like you can compete against other companies? And that is going to be our expertise on physical entry. But not just physical entry, being able to tell you what you actually need to do that makes sense both business wise and cost wise to alleviate the vulnerabilities that we do find in our testing, right? So go up to people and tell them like, hey, I'm looking for doing things in, RF exploit design or RF reverse engineering or whatever your thing is, right? Or I think we do the best at I think we're the best IR plan, and we can help you with business disaster recovery and business continuity, right? You're
Well-
just like, we're very experienced at that. We've helped companies move, like we've helped. This is not a service that we offer like to everyone, but we've helped companies move from areas that we know are going to be taken by war pretty quickly and have them move literally out of country and like all their employees out of country as well, right? That's not a standard offering that we give. So if you're going to call me to like, oh shit, we need that, like I'll probably say no, but like tell them maybe that's your thing. Like I have a friend, that is his thing. He helps companies move out of country, right? Not like the US, like bad places that war is about to break out into, or good places that war are about to break out into. But like go and offer those, talk to people and be like, this is what we do the best, right?
How do you recommend approaching people? Like, what's the best time? Or do you just get them like at the end of a call, a business meeting, or do you approach them outside of work, like at a conference, or you just
everywhere. You're always selling, right? Once you start a company, like you're always selling, so it doesn't matter.
So get them to refer you to other people they know who they're like, oh, we like you, you're good. Sure.
Or just make them a new contact themselves, right? Like I remember I was flying from Phoenix to DC, and I was flying I got upgraded for free to first class, so I was like, cool. I wasn't flying for a client, so they weren't paying for that, so I wasn't flying first class. And even if a client does pay for it, usually I don't take it up on it, because I just get free upgrades anyway a lot of times. But I got a free upgrade to that. I was talking to someone that worked for a utility that was going to DC to talk about some of the problems they're having with utilities, and I was like, no shit, I'm literally going to DC to brief members of Congress about our current state of national security where it comes to items around critical infrastructure. And my terms of critical infrastructure is not like CISA's terms of critical infrastructure, where they think if you are living and breathing or if you are made out of concrete, you're considered critical infrastructure, right? I think critical infrastructure is critical infrastructure. So a warehouse is not critical infrastructure in my book, right? But it was for utilities. And I was like, damn, like I'm briefing members of Congress about this stuff right now. And he was a higher up in the company. He was EVP, so executive vice president in security, right? The CISO actually reported to him before, and then he was working with the CEO. That's how that company worked, or that particular place worked. I sold him on a project for that whole flight, but I didn't make it seem like a sales pitch. I was just like, so clearly you got some knowledge in this, right? And this is how I do it. If you want to know, there's two secrets of business that I have for you that I'll share. The first secret is never say no, right? And what I mean by that is you don't be the one that says no. Client wants you to do a web app pen test. Okay, cool. You don't really like doing web app pen tests. You can hire someone else to do that, right? But let's say you're just not interested in it at all. You don't tell them, no, we're not going to do that, right? You'd be like, okay, yeah. And then you charge double your rate, right? Let them be the ones that say no. Be like, no, we can't do that. I was like, okay, that's fine. Come back to me at a later time. Like the prices could be different, whatever. That's just our surge pricing for Q4, or whatever. You make up something about it. So don't be the one to say no, because sometimes you'll be like, oh, okay, you want me to be out there tomorrow? Cool. It's going to take you to book a private jet for me, and I'm going to charge you $30,000 a day, every day I'm on site, right? They're going to tell you no, right? Or you might think they tell you no, and then they're like, yes. And you're like, oh shit. Okay, well now I have to go figure that out. So don't be the one that says no. And the next one is when you're selling something to someone, don't be like, I can solve this problem for you. That's what you want to lead to. But approach it as like, hey, you probably have a lot of good knowledge. I want to learn the struggles that you're dealing with, and just listen to their struggles that they're dealing with on related to like business, right? Or related to not necessarily business, but security, right? Like they're in the security group. What are some of the things that you're having trouble with right now? And then eject like, okay, so you give them tidbits in there of like, oh, we're having a problem right now where we're having homeless get into our building all the time, right? And you're like, okay, and then you can provide them like one or two tidbits on like how you can address that, because you don't know if it's actually a homeless person or if it's me breaking in, right? So you give them some tidbits on how to address that, and then you start talking about more on that, and you start developing. Basically, you're leading this conversation to develop a scope of work in this, and then at the end, you ask for the sale. So don't just be like, oh yeah, that was a great convo, I'll talk to them later. At the end of it, you ask for the deal. Be like, hey, you have these items. I believe I can help you with this. So this is the part where you do make it salesy, like essentially, right? I think I can solve some of these problems for you. I can't solve all your problems, but I can solve some of these problems for you quickly and efficiently. Would you be interested in me just sending you over like an initial scope, and then we can talk more about that, right? And sometimes you'll get like, no, fuck you. And sometimes you'll get the, yeah, sure. And then from those yeah, sure's, right? It's going to be like 1 out of every 10 times you're going to get a client out of there. So,
and sometimes you get 2 or 3 because then they start telling everybody else.
Yeah, they tell their friends, or you build like you do a project with them, and then that whole security org, a new CISO comes in and everyone leaves. They liked that one project that they worked on, and now everyone that just left, they all went to different companies, or they went to like 2 or 3 different companies, and then they recommend you.
You plant seeds and then it branches. That's genius.
Yeah.
There was this one client that told all their friends, so now I'm officially their vision guy. So he sent us to like 3 other clients.
So that's what you do, right? And then it can kind of steamroll, but you're selling without selling, essentially. You're listening to them. You're approaching it as like, hey, I want to learn from you. And I legitimately, this is the other thing that's probably worked out really well with me. I legitimately want to hear about other people's, not just their woes in security, but their tidbits of knowledge in security, so I can learn from them. Like, even if I know I'm approaching this to sell them something, like I legitimately want to hear what tidbits of security that they have, or what has worked well for them and their role. And that has worked out really, really well. and just knowing how to, maybe nothing comes out from there, but the next time I'm talking to someone else and they're like, oh yeah, we're running into this problem, and be like, oh, have you thought about looking at it through this like approach? And they're like, oh yeah, that actually could work, right?
So come to them because they're an expert in their field, right? They know what challenges they're dealing with, and it's
Right.
like you don't have that knowledge set, so you're kind of asking them to confide in you a little bit about some of their challenges, right? And then from there, you kind of estimate like how much interaction time do I have left with this person, and as you develop sort of a scope, you close at the end with either scheduling a meeting, hey, would you like to talk about this further, kind of type of deal, or you basically get permission to interact with them further, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I used to do at like DEF CON in the early days of Red Mesa is I would book dinner reservations for like 2 or 3 people, right? Or actually I moved it. I actually, because it kind of bit me in the ass one time, I move it. It's like I book it for like 4 or 5 people, right? And because if you have a reservation for 4 people and you then only have 2 people show up, it's easy to just like be like, oh, it's only 2 of us now instead of 4. But I would book like dinner reservation items or like lunch reservation items at different restaurants in Vegas. And I would then like find people I would want to like sell something to. I would find them at the conference wherever they are at, right? Stalk their LinkedIn or whatnot. Start talking to them, and then be like, "Hey, you want to grab lunch?" And be like, "I'll pay for lunch. I just want to continue this conversation because I'm getting a lot out of it, right?" And they'll be like, yeah, sure. Well, I'll take free lunch, right? And then you go and you set it up. And, it doesn't have to be like a fine dining restaurant, right? It'd just be a normal restaurant that you have a reservation at. So you're not waiting around to get a seat. So you can then have that more close, intimate discussion point or time frame with them, right? Where it's just you and them, or you, them, and one of their team members that are now talking about these items. And you can be like, hey, I can help you with these things. I can't help you with these things. Would you be interested in doing that? And like DEF CON is like where I would sell next year's projects all the time. Okay. And on the consulting side, like we would sell projects on the consulting side, but Red Mesa also, we do a lot of research, and that's the big side of Red Mesa is the research side, or the bigger side, I guess. Well, I consider it the big side of Red Mesa. So we would there at like DEF CON and stuff like that, we would sell more of those like longer term research projects. And again, that's less of a 1-to-1 hour worked versus hour paid type of items. So that would help us get around that feast and famine cycle as well.
Is that more like you're selling them a bulk of hours that they can use for like specific things that they want to address, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, it depends. A lot of times what it would be is they would have like a product, or they're like interested in the product space, and we would go get 3 of their competitors' products, reverse engineer it, and be like, hey, these are the items that they do. This is what you should do with your stuff, right? And we would approach it from a security standpoint. So we're essentially reverse engineering their competitors to then tell them where on the security stuff, what they did correct, what they did incorrect, so that they can integrate that into their product more efficiently, right? So if you have something that has a lot of sensitive data that's stored on a device, you want to know how your competitors got around that problem, or how they are approaching it, so that you can come up with a better solution. So when you are talking to that customer base, be like, oh, hey, Mr. Person in the military, yeah, our competitors, they store their information this way on the chips, but like if that device gets lost in the field, like this is how a bad guy would pull that data off. And now you have all these worries of items that you have to be, contend about now. You don't have to worry about that with our chip. Like that, those series of attacks would not work against our product, but it works on our competitor's product.
Is that something that you'd like propose to them as something that they could use to sell their product?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Our research group was more focused on like providing points of a differentiation for their sales teams that they could go use, right? When it
Okay.
got down to like the sales engineer selling the product to them and
So
stuff like that.
you're identifying. So in addition to like, having them sort of confide in you about their own problems and challenges, but you kind of open up a problem space that they might not have thought of, or hasn't
Right.
become a problem yet, right? And
Mhm.
say you have risk here,
Right.
and
Yep.
and you don't give them the solution necessarily, or do you? Because you're not giving them the process, right?
Yeah. So we'll give them a solution on what we would recommend that they do, and then they can implement the solution itself.
But I mean, during the pitch, you're not necessarily giving it away.
No. Well, and we may not even have the answer. We got to find
Right.
out the answer.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then there are some times where we're doing
But it's
like
a talking point. It's like,
yeah.
here's what your competitors are doing wrong. I wonder what you're doing wrong. Let's find out. Like,
Yeah, or we'll do R&D against our product itself. Just it's like consulting, but we consider it research.
right.
So it's a different arm on the Red Mesa side.
It's kind of
that,
going
like,
in with the answer book to the test, right?
Yeah, it never like the researchers never interface with consultants at Red Mesa. So like anyone who ever hired as a researcher, except for very rare cases, ever talked to anyone that was a consultant, right? And a lot of times, most of the folks that are doing work at Red Mesa are like contractors, right? It's not all W-2. We've had W-2s, employees and stuff like that, but most of the folks that we have doing stuff are 1099 contractors with us. Sometimes they're long-term 1099 contractors because they just don't want to be W-2 employees, right? My first offer that I ever gave to someone, I was like, hey, I want to pay you $275,000 a year to do pen testing with me. And they're like, no. I was like, why not? And they're like, I just want to be a 1099 employee. So I paid them essentially the same thing, right? I paid them $300K, $150 an hour to work with me for that long-term engagement. And they just never became an employee. And that was like my first offer to someone to become an employee. I was just like, well, not my first offer, because I had a QA person and PM before then. But my first like consultant offer. And they're just like, nope, I just want to be a contractor. And I was like, why? And they're like, because I want to be able to tell you no if I don't want to work on a project. And I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Havoc, did you have more slides?
No, I'm good with the slides. The slides are just to keep us on track. This conversation is
yeah.
way more interesting than that should have had in the slides. All right, we got a question. If you were to write a guidebook on how to break into buildings for R&D purposes only, what would be your top tips for avoiding detection?
Get hired there.
Janitor, get the keys to the building.
Yeah, just get hired there. They give you a laptop, badge access, and a VPN access. What else do you need? You want to know how our government spooks do it? They get hired places, right? That you want to know how state actors
do they use their real
hired.
creds and just like make an alternate LinkedIn with like a different background and have somebody who can verify these non-existent jobs they've had?
Yeah, so that is there are companies out there. Oh man, this is like going deep now. There are companies out there that are set up profiles for people that don't exist, and the agencies, they will maintain them for years. Like some of these profiles are 20 years old, right? These people don't exist. And then a group will be like, we need someone that has this experience in the background. They hire someone, or one of their folks will actually literally have that experience. They'll go in there and they'll just then take over the persona of that person, right? And there's already docs and all these pay stubs and all this stuff supporting for this person. So there are companies that literally set up these personas that are decades old, that then an agency will grab and then transact with that.
That's pretty badass. I had no idea about that.
Do you have any good techniques for detecting this at a company? Like, are there warning signs that someone is from a three-letter agency trying to?
Yeah, there are.
What do you look out for?
You can utilize systems. A system that everyone knows now is like Palantir, right? You can use Palantir to find large links and personal relationships between people and figure out that they're not really who they say they are. Look at like their databases to see where people have traveled to other countries that you can see. So like a big problem that actually affects the defense industry in the US right now is we have US citizens who were born here in the US and then they go back, they're just born here, like their parents flew here just to give birth here, so their son has citizenship, right? They go back to their country of origin, right? We'll use China as an example. They are raised as someone who is going to be an agent for the Chinese CPP. And then since they're US citizen, they come back to the US to go through university here. And then they get hired as a defense contractor, which they can do because they're a US citizen, or they get hired as a utility worker and they're doing espionage, or they're there as a sleeper cell. And this is a very real problem that's affecting the US right now that no one wants to talk about because it's racist. But which is literally something that I was told. They're like, we don't talk about that because it can imply racism. And I was like, there is no racism. Like,
we're at war, pretty much.
Yeah,
like,
I don't care what country they're
generation
from.
warfare.
I literally just care that they're an insider threat for another nation.
It's not like you're trying to open up an internment camp for them, right? It's like, no, right. This is a real threat.
And oh man, so like no one wants to talk about it, but there are I can tell you there are large companies that come to us and they're like, how do we solve this problem, right? And then they'll come to us because they know we don't talk about our clients, we don't name our clients, right? It's a fireable offense at Red Mesa and stuff like that, or like we'll never use you as a contractor again if you drop our clients' names, especially on certain projects. And they'll come to us because they know that we'll keep it like to the utmost secret. See that they don't want to talk about this, they don't want to come out, but they want us to do this type of stuff to see if someone is a threat, or if if they are not who they say they are. And we work with another group actually who literally just focuses on that. And that other group is a really good friend of mine. Yeah, that's a for example.
Is to keep things close to the chest.
No, but our design in the company is everything is kept close to the chest. So like when I had a business director, a director of business development, he did not know anything about the research side because that wasn't what he was working on. He was working on the consulting side, and he didn't know about what we'll call other projects, right? So those are like, when we're going in and doing something like this, where someone is wanting us to determine, hey, we think these people are insider threats. Can you validate this, or can you show us that they're not, type of things. Like he wasn't involved with any of that, right? The PM will work on the research side and the consultant side, but he doesn't work on what we call the special project side, right? So everything is very compartmentalized, and it's designed that way in Red Mesa. So yeah.
What is the most badass thing about an engagement you can tell us without breaking client confidentiality?
Yeah. There's a few. I used a helicopter to break into a place one time, or actually, well, twice, but one time we did it without the client having to be with us. So that was cool. That was like something I wanted to do on my, that was like a bucket list thing, is like use helicopter to break into a building physically. Yeah, we got approval to do that. And how we did it is, I can tell you how we did it. I can't tell you who we did it against, or even what type of company they were. That company had private jets and helicopters that they would use to travel, because they had some sites that were hard to get to, or they had executives that had to travel and get to different places very quickly, right? So we found where you can make a request to get on a manifest, and then would go up to your manager, and they would have to approve it. So compromised employee account, and then compromise manager's account, and then just say that we're that employee. And then we actually found that employee's like badge. We found that employee. We scanned their badge. We got their badge data because we still have to badge in, right? But when you badge in, if you badge into a building, it would show you like the face of that employee while you're badging in. So like if security was there, they would see that it doesn't match. But we just print out our new badge with our own face on it. And when you were scanning into the hangar, it doesn't show them like what the face is, right? You just badge in as an employee and you're like, hey, my name's Drew Porter, or, you know, whatever. We actually use the employee's name. I didn't want to use the employee's name because then you just find them on LinkedIn. But my name's Drew Porter, you know, I'm on the 825 manifest to go to this facility. And that's how we did it. So
how do you approach, like, once you get big enough and you start getting those types of engagements, how do you approach getting access to data sources like, you know, Tilo or Palantir, or how do you even
buy it?
go about that? You just buy it? Okay.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you don't buy it. You have a client buy it.
Right.
So like I have a buddy who has, they work with like a lot of law enforcement dealing with insider threat stuff. So like they have different groups of software that we can then utilize for our larger clients that are willing to pay for those type of things, right? It's not cheap, super expensive.
Yeah.
And you're not always going to find the insider, right? And we can't guarantee our results are 100% either. We can just like help you along the investigation route.
You ever get like personal and sort of with them, with the person that they're questioning, you know, asking you to question or, you know, investigate, sort of like to get a sense of them or like observe the behavior?
I won't. We'll have people that, you know, we'll bump into them and talk to them or stuff like that outside of there. But usually a lot of those people, they're very guarded, they're very well trained. So you're not going to be able to get something from just sensing it from them, right? You need to find a path, a little kink in their armor that then opens up a wellspring of connections and data and stuff like that.
So you wouldn't go to, if you know they hang out at a certain, I don't know, like thing that meets their interests, like a meetup, you wouldn't join that and just as another person be like, hey,
I wouldn't. We would send people that would fit into that group.
Okay.
Be able to do that. But like that's not something we're getting into the human intelligence aspect of it.
Right.
And even though like, you know, you can go through all the training provided by the government for that, that doesn't mean that you're going to be the best fit to be doing that particular work for that particular engagement or something like that. Right.
That makes sense. Yeah, you find the person suited for the task.
Yeah.
So,
but a lot of times you don't. I mean, that's you don't even have to go to that level, right? We're doing before you get to that level, you're already, you know, 3 months in doing this investigation, and you already know. You're just trying to get additional data points, right?
Okay.
So. Yeah, there's other cool projects that we've worked on. We had one where it was a company. There were some people inside the company that were they stopped being responsive to the other company owners. So we were asked to like just rip through everything of this company. So like the owners, let's say it was like private equity essentially, right? And they're just like, yeah, they're being weird now. So like we broke into that company, broke into their buildings, compromised their laptops, got everything, found bank documents. They're starting a different company. They're actually going to be like killing all their contracts with this company, like the day before we found it. We found all this proof, found where they're like embezzling money out of into all this crazy stuff, right? Popped all these different accounts. And then the next day, like, you know, they showed up, people showed up, law enforcement was there and stuff like that. But like when I was breaking into this building to break into this company, you know, I had like I had my covert body armor on, and then I had angry men with guns in the parking lot, ready to act. We're on comms, ready to act if something goes sideways, right? Because if something, they got tipped off that something might be happening because one of the private equity folks flew in town like a fucking idiot. We told them not to, but they were dumb. So they got wind that they were flying in, so they knew something was up. And when you are going to be ending a 8 to 9 figure embezzling scheme, people are going to take that and they'll get violent. And this person had a history of violence. So that's why I'm there, and they're paying me a lot of money to be there,
to risk life and limb. You charge triple your rate for that, right? Like
yeah. No, yeah, we charge $30,000 a day. If you want to know. And yeah, so we found everything, and that person actually left the country because they realized how effed they were. So
yikes.
Lovely.
Yeah. So that's the type of projects we've worked on. We worked on some cool stuff. Now, those are like the type of things that everyone wants to talk about, but let me tell you, we've worked on a lot of boring shit too, right? Let me tell you about this really exciting web app pen test that we did. It was fucking terrible. Let me tell you about this network pen test that we did. It was mundane, but it paid. So, it's not all cool James Bond shit. And like I tell everyone, like I myself, I'm not particularly cool or interesting. I have clients that are very cool and are very interesting, and they let me tag along with them sometimes, and they do cool shit, right? Or they give me the opportunity to do cool stuff, but that doesn't make me cool in that sense, right? So, yeah.
Feel free to ignore this question if it's stupid. This one says, if you had to bypass, then it says get around, not use a physical bypass, your own security systems or one you designed, how would you do it?
Oh yeah. I would just kill everyone, and then I would just don't care about anything else. But you don't have to worry about the alarms going off if everyone's dead, right? If you want like the blunt answer about that, like that's not how you should approach it, right? This won't bring a reoccurring business. But yeah, I mean,
you also might not get paid. No.
Yeah. Well, that was like
I
thought that was for like my own personal like system that I designed for like our office, right? Like
yeah, don't you have a warehouse for that?
You just like bomb the warehouse, right? Oh my God, you can now access our network because literally half the building is missing. Yeah, I'm sure the person wanted
silly question gets
answer,
silly answer. Perfectly fine.
There's lots of ways. I can't say that we have designed an impervious, way to secure everything. Right? There's always a way in. Like I said, the easiest way is you want to get around systems that we've helped design security wise and tell clients to do. Just get hired there. Get around all of them. Right?
Yep.
It literally comes back down to that. If you want like a more for real answer of what that would look like. But I have a friend named Robert, and smart guy, and he has this saying, and he says, if it was conceived by the mind of man, it can be defeated by the mind of man, right? So given enough time and enough resources, anything can be defeated.
Yep.
So yeah.
To that point, how do you approach threat modeling because there's two situations that I've personally run into with that, and it's more like sometimes the client comes to you and they don't actually know what their threats are.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't have a good idea, and then some clients have an excellent idea and it's very focused. Like how do you approach that?
Yeah, so when we are doing like when a client is wanting us to emulate a particular threat, we have to see if it's actually realistic in their threat model. Everyone is just like, we want to protect against the APT. And I'm just like, great. But on your security journey, you're still defending against a bored 14-year-old that just learned what Nmap and Metasploit was, right? So like we can pretend to be the APT, but like that's not going to help you. So it actually becomes a longer conversation that we have with them when they're like, we want you to immolate this particular threat. We're like, okay, is that actually what you're facing right now? What is bringing on? Why do you want to protect against that threat? Why do you want to? Why do you feel like you are under attack by that type of threat? And so we look at where they are in their security journey and what is best for them. And a lot of times, like we have clients, they'll come in and like, we want a full spectrum red team, right? We're down. We're going to be paying you, $500,000 to do, 6 weeks worth of work. Have your team come in here and like frickin' just bend us over. And I'll be like, great. You don't need that. No. What you actually need is you need to pay me $18,000 to tell you what your physical threats are. And then you need to pay another $18,000 to tell us so that we can tell you what your highest threats or exposure is on your network side. And you can save the rest of the money and actually use it to fix all the problems that we find. Right. And that is the most common conversation I think we have, especially when I was building the company, which is hard to have because you're just like, oh, shit. They want to pay me $400,000 to like do this full spectrum red team engagement. Like, great. But it's not what the client needs. And you need to give what the client needs. And a lot of times the client doesn't know what they need. They'll know what the problems are. It's funny because they'll know what the problems are, but they don't know what they need to be able to convince management or they think this will be able to convince management to get the funding needed for this. And you can present them with a much cheaper solution. And I do that all the time. And my sales guy hated it all the time. I remember there was a time where a client was just like, hey, we got this budget for you. It's $260,000. We want you to do A, B, and C. And I was just like, okay, what you need actually is you need D. And D is going to cost you $56,000. And they're just like, okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. And my sales guy is just like, well, fuck that. Like, I have a metric to, score a few $1 million in contracts this year. And I just, you just get off $200,000 from that.
Damn it, Drew, there goes my commission.
Yeah. Right. And
but how does that work out on the back end? Do you find that that's a very successful strategy to get them to come back to you for more stuff?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Sometimes it does. We had a project that we actually overscoped quite a bit. They wanted us to validate some things, and I was like, okay, cool. This is going to be 2 weeks. This is going to take you, this amount of dollars. I forget what it was. And it was like day 2. We're like, okay, we validated all these vendors' claims, and they're like, okay. And I was just like, so we're going to charge you for these 2 days of work. And then I'm not going to charge you for anything else. And like the PM literally was just like, I don't understand what you're saying. And I was like, I'm charging you for like $8,000 worth of work. You're going to take all this rest of this money and not do anything with it. Like use it to fix the problems that we found in other reports. But all the claims that you had for this vendor have been validated. They are truthful. You don't need us to be here for another like week and a half, just, jerking ourselves off. And they didn't understand. They're like, it took a while for them to like get what we were saying. I got calls the next day by my point of contacts boss. And it was just like, all right, walk me through everything that we did. And I did. I walked him through what we did. And he was just like, okay, and you're not charging us? I was like, no. Like, I'm going to charge you $8,000 for 2 days worth of work for the amount of people that we had on it, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm not charging you for anything else. And they're just like, well, what do we do? I was like, well, we can do something else. Like, we can. What do you want to do? We also had a where it didn't work out is like we had a social engineering engagement. It was a week long, right? They had all these crazy flags that they want us to get. It's going to cost them $24,000 to do it. for 1 week of an engagement for all this social engineering stuff, and not include like setup time and all this stuff. Literally, my first phone call, I got everything that was needed in the first phone call. Right, it took 30 minutes. And I called the client and I was just like, hey, we got everything. Like, I'm sending you a voice recording right now. We have these 7 flags that you wanted. Download this PDF, have them open up all these things, download this executable, have them open it up, all these things, right? Have them transfer one file to another employee and have that employee open it, right? Like, they had all these flags, and we literally got it done in a 30-minute phone call. And I told the client, okay, like, we don't have to bill you for the rest of the stuff. So they're like, okay, well, what is going to cost? I told them what it was going to cost. And then they had us do one other, with the remaining budget, 6 months later, they had us do one other social engineering engagement. And then I never heard from that client again. Right. Like, we fulfilled their tasks that they needed.
You did too good.
And we didn't hear from them. And that's totally fine. Right. But I can tell you, I provided the best services for that client, reasonably priced, and I was able to save them. And they're actually able to do a whole nother engagement because we're able to do this. Did it work out in our favor? The client likes us, but they haven't gave us any more money. So, yeah.
Last question from me would be, like, you say, like you mentioned at the beginning of this, you don't work directly with any federal agencies or for any federal agencies.
And I never have worked for, I was never a blue badge employee for the U.S. government.
Right. Do you tend to shy away from that type of client or work, or I'm sure you've had
no, so a blue badge
I'm sure
employee,
you've been approached.
So a blue badge employee is, you are a federal employee. So
right. That's not what I mean. I meant consulting wise. Like, do you tend to shy away from?
No, we work with governments
all the time. Okay.
Yeah. Now there are some times, and I won't name anything, but I know you are very familiar with this, David. With this particular story, we had a county or whatever, I don't know, they like asked us for references, and we will give you people's names and numbers, but we will not give you direct company customer names. We will not give you our reference emails address or anything like that. We'll give you a name and a number, and that's all you get. And then you can call them, and then they can tell you what type of company they are if they want to or not. And we have agreements with some of our clients like that, right? But we will never give out a customer name, even if it's references, right? And we literally I had a CISO call me, and he was just like, you're going to lose this project if you don't give us these references. And I was like, that's okay. I don't care. I don't give out client names. And we lost the project, right? And their accounting team was angry. And David gave me a call, and he was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, he literally was just like, what are you doing? Like, you lost the project because of this. And I was like, I don't care. I don't give out client names.
Yeah.
And what was it? It was
that is integrity.
It was a radio project, I believe.
Well, and it was the longer one as well. It was what, like $400K a year for 3 years of work, right, or something like that. Like, I don't give a shit.
The RFP, I don't think it had a value on it. Like a value.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I know that.
Oh, that was the RFP. That's right.
That's what we lost out of, is winning that contract. And like, the CISO was like, literally, like, I got beers with him, and he was just like, what are you doing? I was just like, bro, like, your money is worthless to me. Like, I don't care. I'm not giving you client names. And he was like, you just have to give names. And he was like, he literally was just like, we already know who your clients are. And I was like,
you could have just said, I don't have any clients.
I just would like,
you already know who they are. Then why are you putting me through this?
You had to have, or because part of the RFP was you had to be doing business for like 5 or 7 years, right, with consistent work. And they wanted to see financials, and we gave them financials, and I was all happy with that. But as soon as they're like, we want client names, I was like, no. And we didn't win the contract because of that.
See, where that comes in handy is if you've been doing business with them already, you can just give them their own name, and that's the only reference you give them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they knew who our clients were. Like,
right.
Like,
yeah.
they literally were in the same. They shared the same radio towers as our clients. They understood what it was, right?
Yeah.
And that was their argument. Is like, we already know them, and I was like, right, but like, you don't get it. Like, this is the level of secrecy you will have when
Right.
you are a client, and if that is what you think, whatever, how much money this is going to be is worth it for you, um, it's not worth it for us. So, and that's what we do, right? So, and so that's another point on it, right? Is like, it doesn't. That's not a good business model to have. Like,
Right.
but it works. It works for the model that I want. So I'm not saying that that's what you should do if you're looking to start a consultancy. I'm saying that's what I did. Most companies have clients that they can put on a reference sheet. And we have clients that are willing to have their first and last name and their phone number given on that sheet, but we will not put your name, your company name, on a reference list, right? And we've lost clients, we've lost projects because of that before. That's not the only one we've lost because of it.
Right.
And I was just like, no, that's just not what we do. And we've actually won clients because we had one client, they're a utility, and they're like, you will lose this project if you don't give us one reference. And I was just like, okay, I don't care. And I said, and I was like, is that what you gave me a phone call about? Is this the only thing that you need today? And they're like, yes, this is the last thing that we need, and then you can win this project. And I said, nope, consider us out of the project. And I said, consider us out of the bid, if that's what you are demanding from us. And so, we hung up, and the next day I got a call, and they're just like, okay, you passed the test. You're the only vendor that passed the test. And we did work, and we continue to do work with them. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
But most of the time,
yeah.
that doesn't happen.
Right.
Like, that's
It's
one time
exception
that's
to the
happened.
rule. Right.
Yeah. Other times you just lose hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in contracting because you have this ideal, and it's not like our clients, it's not impossible to find out like who we work with. We're just not going to say it. And we have plenty of clients that actually say like, oh yeah, we do work with Red Mesa. I'm just not going to write it down on a piece of paper and submit it to a RFP.
Do you have any, because that's all public record. Anyone can request,
And I'm sure there's like recommendations on your LinkedIn for people you worked with that they could go look up themselves.
I don't think I have any recommendations. I have one pending recommendations that talks about buying donkeys in Mexico or something, I think.
What?
But I have a friend who's trying to break in to sort of government contracting, and I've given him a lot of advice, but I'm sure he'll be watching this.
Be a veteran who is disabled. That's an Eskimo. That is
look at Deltry again.
Woman, right?
You black Jew woman.
Black Jew woman. Yeah. That'd be good.
Is that still going to be the way things go? I've heard there are some changes in that area coming.
I mean, it depends. Like the city of Dallas, if you want to know, I'll call it. They're not a client of ours. We looked at bidding on their projects. But basically, if you were not a woman of color, you were not going to win that cybersecurity project. And my business development person talked to them. They're like, okay, it's out of a score. They score you out of 100, right? In this particular case, you have to score 80 or above. And the highest score that you could get without being a what they called a woman of color was a 79. And I was like, okay, so we're not going to spend time bidding on this project. I don't know if Dallas is the same way, but it definitely was at that time. And we have other clients, that are just like, oh, okay, we need to know what your what your business status is. I'm like, we're a small business. That's it. Like, there's nothing special. I'm not a veteran.
I generally wonder if people actually go around like trolling the VA, looking for somebody who meets that criteria, so that they can be like, hey, you're going to be the public face of our company, just so we can get these contracts.
Yeah, or you have them submit to it. Like, I have a friend, and she runs a company who submits for contracts, and she's super smart, super good. But she doesn't fulfill the contracts, right? But she's a disabled veteran who's lesbian, and that like, jack up that score, right? Like play the game. If that's the game, play the game, right? Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Right.
I don't like, okay, cool, man. Like you have found your niche is being able to submit a bid for this and get that bid, win it, and then she will subcontract it out. And she has it in her contracts that she can sub it out. And then she just takes a cut of it, right? And there are companies that do that. So it's not new. There was a training company when I was running a training company. There was a training company that would come to us, and they were disabled veteran women. And they would they were on the GSA schedule, and they would put your training on that schedule as them, and then you would offer it and they would take a cut from it as well, right? So it's not like a new business model. And there's tons of people. But again, if you could be Eskimo and disabled veteran, oh man, you're gonna win so many contracts. Congratulations. Let's party on your yacht.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. One of the recommendations that I've given a couple friends who are interested, like I said, was just like if you're small starting out, there's a preferential treatment of people who have no experience to give them a shot, right? So throw a little bit in just to get in the door. And I'm obviously one of the larger platforms, right? For that is Periscope. And do you have any others that you would point them to, or techniques to slip your foot in the door, so to speak, on?
Yeah. I'll give you the technique that I did, right? That has worked well for me. I don't have any generic, I don't have a Periscope recommendation, right? The thing that has gotten me the furthest in business, and the reason why I've been able to make the contacts that I have, is doing great work for other people, right? I have made other people countless millions of dollars. We're not talking ones or twosy millions of dollars, right? We're talking eight-figure amounts on projects for them, being able to do that, consistently doing great work for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was okay, now I'm doing my own thing, they're oh shit, work with Drew. He will help you out, right? So doing great work for other people has been the thing that has helped me the most. Making other people rich essentially is what has helped me the most when it came to growing my business. Being reliable and being the person that person can always count on, right? We hear a lot about in the industry of oh, I get paid, I only get paid $275,000 a year from my company that's super greedy. So I'm only going to put in 40 hours a week, right? There are people that have this mindset because I only get paid for working 40 hours a week, right? I was great, cool. I was getting paid $8 an hour and then making a piece of hardware that a government bought for a couple $1 million, right? I did that while making $8 an hour for a company. And then I got a raise to $16 an hour. But those type of things, working with those people that I was working with then knew oh shit, Drew's going to do good work for us. So now that he costs way more, right? We're going to pay that because we know we're going to get good work. So do good work before you're starting your own company, do great work for other people and go above and beyond. And then people will want to work with you. And then you can start charging whatever you want to charge for your hourly rate because they know that you're going to do great work for them.
Yeah.
So take a hit on the front end to then make it in the back end, right? That's worked for me. Maybe it doesn't work for everyone, right? Maybe you take the hit and then it just never pays off.
You want your clients to be you're the best. Even, you know what I mean? Even if you're not perfect every time, as long as you do good work, right?
Yeah,
and you leave them saying, well, he's the best, they'll pay what you're asking, right?
Well, it doesn't even have to be the best. And I definitely don't think I've always there's been times where I've failed on projects or I feel I've let people down before, right?
Yeah, not every project's going to go perfect.
But you don't necessarily have to be the best. You just have to be, and this term is something I learned from Bishop Fox, which they like preface a lot of stuff on the McKinsey model, right? Is the trusted advisor, right? Like I remember I had a client, they called me because ISIS was threatening some of their employees in the California office. And I was like, why did you call me? Like, okay, this sounds like a very big deal. These are legitimate threats coming from ISIS. Like from like actual ISIS, like known accounts online that were ISIS. Why are you calling me? Like that, I did a physical entry test for you, and we did a network pen test for you. Where in my scope did this feel like I was the one to call? And the person literally said, "You're the person I know I could trust with this information." I was like, okay, cool. Then that's why they hired us, right? Like
So
I didn't help them with that. Like, well, we were involved with helping them with some stuff around that. There was actually another group that they're dealing with domestically that we are helping them with afterwards. But then it was just like, okay, cool. Let me call some friends that are feds that can actually like help you with this shit. And like we were able to like contact them with that, right? But I was like,
then you did do what you know, like that's
but
the
having a
expectation there.
reputation.
yeah, but I didn't charge them to make a phone call, right? Like,
always having their best interest in mind, right?
Yeah.
Allows them to like come to you when they don't know where else to turn, right?
Yeah. Well, and they were just like, yeah, we didn't. You're just the first person I thought would be able to call. So it worked out, right? Yeah. And reputation is easy to lose as well, right? Like I had a project, it was for a hospital, and we wrote like we have this like little Nmap scanner. We like use Nmap, right? But we modify it heavily so it looks different, and it can look like something else. Like we knew that they were using like they use like Rapid7 and Nessus scanning. So we made our Nmap system kind of look like Nessus.
Nessus uses Nmap in the backend anyway.
Right. But so we like kind of have the signature that says like, make this kind of look like Nessus, but it not be Nessus. And then it does a few more things as well. It's worked well. For whatever reason, it like failed on this project. So they're just like, okay, we gave you a list of 20,000 hosts to show up and you only see like 1,000 of them. What's wrong? I was like, I don't know. That's what it said. And it was a fuck up on like something I did on the code end, right? I'm not a developer. But I did stay in a Holiday Inn Express, which made me think I could write this code. And so like I fucked up, and then we use this code successfully on tons of other projects, right? But it fucked up on this time, and it was egg on face on me. I looked bad, and it was like a buddy that recommended us that worked in that company to do it, and that was like a total fuck failure on my side, right? I look like an idiot, and I was like, ah, shit, right? So like, yeah, it ruined my reputation with that company and with my buddy as well.
Yeah.
So,
I've had a situation like that blow up in the basically the scoping phase where they're like, send us something so we know what your reports look like. And I failed at redacting it because I used an off-brand version of Adobe to redact it because I couldn't get Adobe to work. And they're like, you redacted it wrong. Like, we're not working with you. It was bad.
You didn't change the metadata first before you sent it to us.
It was something silly, like a black box over an image that had text behind it that you know what I mean? Something like that. It was like in one area, and they were like, no.
Yeah.
So, but and it burned my reputation with the friend who recommended me and that potential client. So
one of my old bosses used a pen test report template from a previous company, and he sent it to his new company and forgot to change the watermark and everything.
That's great.
Oops.
Yeah. So reputation is important, but you can lose it. It's hard to build, and it's easy to lose.
Yeah.
So this question from Lamer007. It seems like you have a PhD in finding creative ways to get it around very good security. How do you stay motivated to keep pushing the boundaries without getting bored? Yeah,
I definitely don't have a PhD. I'm a college dropout. But I appreciate the nice words. Thank you for the nice comment. My one superpower is grinding. That's it. Like anyone can do, literally anyone can do. I honestly believe anyone can do what I can do if they're willing to grind at the same level that I am, right? And this is not like a grind mentality, type of thing. I forget what the I don't know, that's not a hustler's mentality or whatever it's called, right? I forget. I'm not part of that community or that culture. I realize what I want, and I know that I'm going to have to work 3 times as hard as everyone else to achieve the same thing, and I'm willing to just work 3 times as hard. So I'll forego sleep. I'll do different things so that I just focus on what I want, right? And it's hurt, my personal relationships sometimes. My family has suffered from it before. And I'm trying to fix that. So don't think like I have a very awesome wife. My wife is amazing. Not only does she tolerate my shenanigans, which I have a shit ton of, right? She is very understanding of like, hey, you're the leader of the house. I'm going to follow what you want to do. And we set up boundaries for what that means, right? Like if I am not going to be, if I start this thing and I'm not making any money and it's going to endanger our family's financial situation to where we'll never be able to recover, like that's not something that we agreed that's fine to take that amount of risk, right? So, but with that, she has allowed me to spend ample amount of time just working all the time. And she gets, angry about it, especially in the earlier days. Now she's less angry because I have infinitely more free time. But it's just grinding. So working 20 hours a day, you go to your job for 8 to 12 hours, and then you are working for another 8 to 12 hours. And, I used to live with, when I was starting Red Mesa, I lived with one of my buddies named Royal, and he said he hated living with me. And I was like, oh, okay, why? Like, why? And he'd said, because I feel like I am falling behind. And it was something that was eye-opening. He would see that I would go, because we worked at the same place. I was building the red team. He was on the red team. We'd go work for 8 to 12 hours, and then I would still then be working for another 8 to 12 hours on the other side, right? It was about 20 hours is what I was doing, sleeping for 4 hours, getting up, showering for 5 minutes, and then going again, right? And he disliked that because he was just like, I feel like I have to work that hard. I was like, you don't. I have to work that hard. Other people don't have to work that hard. So it's just grinding. That's it. That's my only superpower is
Yep.
I don't like sleep and I can grind. I would not recommend taking stimulants to be able to get to grind to that level though, right? That doesn't mean you take Adderall you take Adderall if you need to take Adderall, right? For different reasons. But that doesn't mean if you don't need to take Adderall, you take Adderall to do that, right? It's actually the one, like I have friends who are just like, never ever try Adderall, Drew. You'll just get addicted. So I've never tried it. But like do it be healthy with it. Like healthy is, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily healthy, right? Like I used to love lifting and all that. And now I'm just a fat piece of shit.
Someone in the comments called you a humble ass bastard.
So thanks. But so I'm not like in peak physical performance, right? Like I'm now trying to work on that because I have more time. But like I let a lot of that slide when I was running my company. But that doesn't mean like find the balance. Like make sure if you're minimizing your sleep, go to your doctor and talk about what that is going to do for you. What are the long-term effects? Can your body actually handle that? There are some people that can operate at a small amount of sleep. I have a friend that can operate at even less sleep than I can. Now that I'm older, right? I'm an old piece of shit now. Instead of a young piece of shit, I have to sleep now like 5 hours, right? On my body. Like I can go and do a day where I sleep like a couple hours, like 2 or 3 hours, and then I can work the next day. But like that next day, like I got to get 8 hours of sleep the next day.
Yeah.
Right. So realize that when you're older. But yeah, just grinding. That's my only superpower, is just grinding and getting through the boring shit and doing the stuff that no one wants to do. But I just know that I have to do it, because if I don't do it, it's going to fail. And once you start having employees, their livelihood depends on you.
Yeah.
So if you fuck up, you're fucking not just yourself, you're fucking your employees. And that is something that like personally motivates me, where it's just like, oh shit. And it's a lot of responsibility, and it's a lot of stress, way more stress. The most stressful time I had in my business, I thought running my business full time and like that was my only source of income was stressful. No, having employees, that is stressful, right? And then over time you get to a level where you're big enough to where it becomes less stressful. But especially when you start out young, in your business and you have employees and their livelihood is depending on it, right? You're paying them a 6-figure amount, or you're paying them, right below a 6-figure amount, and then they can make 6 figures or more with bonuses. And like that relies on them. Their health insurance relies on you. To
that end, like
yeah,
everyone makes mistakes and screws up with clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice around that? Well, this is a compound question. So one is about the art of apologizing. Like, how do you approach that? And then the other is, how do you balance quality of work with timeliness?
Yeah. The balance, I'll cover the balance timely of work with timeliness. And that really is just going down to properly scoping something out, right? And that is a skill set on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So if you properly scope out a project, you will have it. You should scope in that good balance in there already. Now the art of apologizing, I'm not really good at this. I'm not going to lie. And I've lost clients over it before as well. So don't think I'm like perfect in it and that I've never lost a client over it. As soon as I fuck up or someone on my team fucks up, I remember I had like someone on my team fuck up. I just told them like, yep, we fucked up. I'm sorry. Like I didn't give them excuses. I literally was just like, yep, we didn't deliver the level of engagement that they were looking for at that time. And it wasn't at any fault. I didn't find any fault in the consultant, right? I didn't find any fault in our scoping. It's just that they had a different expectation than what we could deliver, or than what we did deliver. I was like, yep, no, we fucked up. And we never worked with that client ever again, right? But I just owned it. And that person who was very angry with me on the phone call, we go and hang out, we get drinks now, right? He's actually at a different company now. But he was very appreciative that I didn't try to like just sugarcoat my fuck up.
Bullshit it.
And I was just like, yep, no, I just fucked up. And that's what I'll do is like, if I make a mistake, I'll be like, yep, that was my bad. Right. And as an employer, all your employees' bads are your bads. And I don't blame my contractors or my employees. I will always take the fall for them and be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Right. And you can offer like free services or whatever, if that's what you want to do. But yeah, I just say, yep, we messed up and I'm sorry about that. We can try to make this right. Or you could just, not use us for consideration.
With projects that you bid on, I find a lot of people struggle with scoping on those because there's like it's very limited. Like everything's out in the air. They can only answer certain questions. How do you have advice there?
If you can, so my advice, so how I learned how to do scoping is one, being a consultant, right? Like if you haven't been a consultant before, don't start your own consultancy. Like work for other consultancies, see how things are working, see what they do well, see what they don't do well, see what there's a client need or where there's a client, there's an over servicing aspect versus an under service aspect. But try to get on those scoping calls so you can see, especially when you're young, in consulting when you're a consultant for someone else, so that you can see how they are equating the amount of web apps or nodes on a network or buildings to hours, right? And learn from them, and then know your own limitations, right? So I know if I were to scope something, like if I were to do something, a project, let's say I was doing a physical entry project and I was going to be the one that was doing it, right? Which is, I'm going to caveat this with don't scope it as though you are doing it, right? Like if you're the technical business owner and this is something that you do all the time, don't scope it as like you are doing it. Add a little bit of fluff in there if someone else is going to be working on the project, right? Now, if
And
you're
then
going to be working
also,
on the project, yeah, go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
and also when you're doing your documents and everything, don't use the word I
Oh, right.
or,
Yeah.
or us.
Yeah. It's always third person, right? It's
Yeah.
very impersonal, third person.
The
but
team. Yeah.
But when I am
I like to
scoping-
say company or the consultant, stuff like that.
Yeah, the Red Mesa team or the red team or the purple team or, you know, whatever, right? But like when I'm scoping a project, let's say I'm like scoping a physical entry, right? Okay, cool. You have a 25,000 square foot building, it has 6 entrances, you have ground-based radar, you have leaky coax on it, right? All these different security things around it. You have shake sensors on your fences. We don't usually hop fences. That's a different security company. That's not really our style. But you know, they have all these different security things. I look at, okay, 20,000 square feet. In there are 3 office segments and a data hall, right? Or, you know, a data hall being data center type thing. 3 office areas, right? They have engineers, R&D, and they have administrative staff. They have 24-hour security guards on there. I'm going to have to spend, you know, 2 or 3 days doing a recon to make sure I can get everything that I need. And then I'm going to have to spend another 2 or 3 days breaking into this place.
So it comes through experience and just knowing your product. Really
right. So I know that's like what I will take to do this with one other person that is also skilled at breaking into places to be able to deliver a stellar end result to the client, where we break in, we look like badasses and all that stuff. And again, I'll cover that in a second. Actually, I won't jump out to there. So it's knowing what your timeline looks like, how much time it would take you to do the project based off of your experiences, right? And then if you're trying to scope a project that you know you can do, but you don't have a lot of experience doing, call your buddies that like do it and just be like, how long do you think this would take? Right? Like a simple phone call. And this is what I do all the time as well, is like I'll seek counsel from many, and then make a decision on something, right? Like I'm not the arbiter of all answers. I can learn from other people's mistakes and take that knowledge and actually transact with that. And that's what we call wisdom, right? Taking knowledge and transacting with it. And that's the difference between wisdom, knowledge, and information. Not to get, you know, all philosophical on you there, but yeah, just having that experience or having someone that does have that experience and having and understanding like, okay, why do you think a network that has 500 nodes on it is going to take 3 days to do a network-based pen test on it? You know, it's Active Directory, Windows, you know, setup and whatnot. They don't have any Linux boxes. Why is that? Right. And talk to that process and be like, well, this is how much scanning time will take. And then based off of that, we can expect these type of vulnerabilities. And then if we don't find these type of vulnerabilities, you know, manually finding these type of items, and chaining multiple low risk findings to get that high risk finding, we believe will take this amount of time just based off of, you know, previous experience on that. So you don't necessarily have to have the experience, but talk to someone that does and figure out their reasoning on that.
So balancing that sort of with the client expectations and making sure that they are getting like you're used to delivering a certain depth of assessment, right? That's your that's your MO. And sometimes the client's expectations are different, right? They'll give you a much larger scope and ask you to go less deep, right? But how do you just have a conversation with the client and make sure that that's something you check off of your sort of things that you collect from information from them?
Yeah, well, there's two questions that I asked the client is what does a successful project look like for you outside of us not finding anything because you're super secure, right? And what is the goal for this project? Like, what is the motivation behind this? And is the motivation going to be you are there to, provide, like the team already knows all the vulnerabilities, but they just need an external consultant so that they can go to executives and get funding to fix this?
Yeah.
Or are you there because they truly don't know their vulnerabilities and they are trying to find out their weak spots because they don't have the knowledge or the expertise on the team to actually locate that type of information or those vulnerabilities on this segment of the network or on this building or on this radio system or wherever, right? So figuring out what their motivation is and what their end goal is, because
how early on in the process do you do that?
that's the first scoping call.
First thing, and then it guides it from there. Like, okay,
yeah, like I mean, it will be at the end of the scoping call, right after I understand what the project looks like,
right?
But it will be in the first scoping call,
Okay.
and then there's two things I wanted to add to that. One thing I tell my clients is our reports aren't there to make you look bad, right? Like we're not here to be like, haha, look, we're good hackers. We can get in. It was just like, yeah, no shit, you can get in. And that's another thing. The clients expect you to get in. And this is what I tell my contractors and my employees. Like, you got in. Congratulations. No one cares. Everyone expects you to get in. I'm not impressed. The client's not impressed. What they want to know is how you did it. Make it repeatable. And make it so that you can give them step-by-step directions so that they can try it themselves, so that when they fix it, they can validate it without having to bring us back in necessarily. But don't get excited that you got in. They expect you to get in.
Yeah.
Now you can get excited. Don't get me wrong. I still get giddy, right? And I actually have a problem sometimes when I'm going on site and I'm smiling just because we're fucking like just raking this network over the coals, or we're just like getting into every single restricted area inside of a building or something like that, right? I get pumped up for it. And when you're on site, you have to kind of hide that because the clients get a little angry sometimes if you're like too excited, right? Don't be high-fiving your consultants. You can do that afterwards, just not on site. Doesn't mean that you can't get excited, but the client expects you to get in. So that's nothing special on that point. And the other thing is, like, with that, our reports are not there to bag on you and be like, look, you did all these things wrong, blah, 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 blah. Our reports are there literally to help you get more funding, whether that or time resources or whatever resource that you need to get more of that so that you can address that particular concern and then continue on your path of your security journey. Right, that is the end goal.
Not till they have to close the crypto shop.
And often, often a goal of these teams, like these organizations that have large security teams, who want to bring in outside consultants, is to prove a point that they've been trying to push, and they can't get it through, so they need someone to like take it over the top.
And I hate that. I absolutely fucking hate that.
Yeah.
And sorry to curse so much on this. I don't usually. I just get a little.
It's okay. We're not monetized. Feel free to curse all you fucking want.
But I am very frustrated, and this is part of my job. I feel like now is talking to executives or higher ups or boards, telling them something that their team already knows, right? And I remember I was talking, it was a long conversation I was having with a CISO, and he wasn't believing the stuff that he was giving his team or his team was giving him, right? He was like, always was like questioning it. And I was just like, why? So like I spent time to sit down with the CISO and just kind of figure out this question. And but I didn't approach it. So that was my goal. That's not what we set up the meeting for, but that was my goal for the meeting, right? The whole other goal, he had another idea of what we were going to be doing for the meeting. And but that wasn't my objective. The whole objective was to figure out this thing. And it basically, like, it came down to the apex of the conversation came down to, like, on this project, your team had already told you these things. Like, why didn't you just listen to them? And you could have literally saved yourselves a few $100,000 instead of having us come in and prove the exact same thing. He's like, yeah, well, the trust but verify. And so then I was just like, and this is a summary of the whole conversation. And I was just like, okay, do you think you're a competent hiring manager? And
Do you trust yourself?
He's like,
your
yeah.
own skills.
And I was just like, do you think that the people that you hire, that you're interfacing with, and the people that are hiring people under you as well, that they have good judgment? Like, are you a good judgment of character? And like, yeah. I was listening, like, then why don't you trust your people? Right? What is he going to do? Backtrack everything? He just fucking, actually, I'm a shitty hiring manager and I actually can't. No, right? And that's
talk him into a corner.
Like that's what you got to do. It's like you just pigeonhole it, right? Like the walls are closing, but you don't make them feel like the walls are closing, right? Like that whole thing was like, oh yeah, like you seem like a very competent, like, and I presented it in a way when I actually did the conversation to where it sounded like compliments, right?
Is this a private company?
This is a private company I did this to, yeah.
Okay.
And you just close in the wall to where there's no escape except for either you suck at your job or you're good at your job. So pick one, right? And his team had a much, I'm not going to say a perfect time, but had a much better time after that conversation, getting stuff done, submitting it, and then being like, hey, this is what we are, this is what our problems are, this is how we can address them, this is what we need. And the CISO learned to it, right?
Before you do the scoping call, do you ever do like an introductory call, like an exploratory kind of call?
Yeah.
That's how I usually do it.
We can do exploratory call. I'll look up stuff with the company. I'll look up stuff with that person that who will be on the call, right? So I can note, especially like, if you're working with a team that's like from Alabama, right? Maybe that person's into college football. You don't want to say something like "Go Dogs," or maybe you do, right? And they're like something for
If you've done your research first, then you know the answer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like you do a little cyber stocky stuff. You don't get weird about it, but you just do cursory research on that person and see what their background is and see what their approach is. If they have, if they've ever done an interview for a newspaper or an online article.
It helps you shoot the shit and kind of build them up.
And you can also tailor your conversations around things, or use analogies that like they'll get, right?
Okay.
So, or that they will like associate with. So again, this is just part of the sales process, right?
Then you can get kind of
social engineering with money. That's it.
To just touch on the point that you made earlier, and Steve, sorry, I'll give it back to you. One of the differentiators that you try, like that I think is really important, is to make a lasting impact, right? And just like the example that you gave, now his team has an easier time. That's a lasting impact past just fixing whatever you find and having a real change in the organization that is positive, right? And that'll keep clients coming back for more, or keep them, spouting about how great you are to everyone they know, right?
Or if your company fails for whatever reason, then you can like go to them and be like, hey, like I need a job, right? And they'll be happy to hire you, type of thing. So
that's awesome. But one thing I just wanted to touch on is that a lot of times it's very politicky, and like if you're doing government work, for example, it's very political, and it's like everyone's kind of in a battle, and you have to play the field on that. So in a private company, it makes sense. But sometimes, I don't think super powerful like CISOs like to be cornered like that necessarily. That's a very bold move.
Oh yeah, I mean, what is he gonna do? Fire me? Okay.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
like,
at least you're real. Yeah.
You're
not just telling him what he wants to hear. Sometimes people
I
really respect
I
that.
will, yeah, I'm gonna fight for his team because his
Right.
team is technically the ones that are really hiring me, but it is going to help them on their security journey, which is then going to help us get past like having to deal with mundane things, right? Like a company is always going to have to deal with mundane projects. I just don't want to be the company they go to do those mundane projects
Yeah.
with, right? I want to be the company that they have like some cool, interesting work, and they want to come to us to do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference between doing a network penetration test on a Fortune 100 company that is, whatever, right? That they make washers, dishwashers, and wind turbines or whatever. Not a client of mine. So before someone is just like, that's GE, not a client.
I was gonna say Bosch.
That's the difference between doing a web app or a network penetration test for that company, or doing a network penetration test for a from a company that is building nuclear salt reactors, right? Or that's the difference between doing let's use GE as an example. That's the difference between doing their generic IT vulnerability scan assessment, or doing, the exploit
Physical security.
finding,
Right.
exploit finding for their controllers that they're putting in the wind turbines, right?
Right.
So like that level of trust is what's going to lead them to putting these, what we'll call, better rewarding projects for you as someone, as a company owner, and for your consultants who are working on them, but what they would call higher impact projects, right? You want to be put on those higher impact projects, and if you go for bat for the team on those managers, and sometimes you have to tell other managers. And this is not to say like every CISO is terrible or like every manager is terrible, right? There are unbelievable managers and CISOs that I know, where like I am learning from them, right? They're not coming to me. Our conversations are very much so like I am getting the nuggets from them. They're not getting any nuggets from me. But going for bat for the team, if they see a consultancy that's willing to do that for them, they're willing to start trusting you with more higher impact projects that are going to be more fun.
Okay. That's awesome. Steve, did you have something you wanted to add?
I forgot.
Oh, okay. Gone. It's okay. We'll come back. So, well, thanks.
Yeah, and the people that are watching, I'm hoping this is becoming insightful for you. And there's so much more that this conversation can go about, right? And if you ever do have a question, like feel free to hit me up. I might be slow to respond sometimes, and that could just because either I'm busy or I'm just away from my computer for a few days because I'm hanging out with my family, right? So don't feel bad. But like if you have a legitimate question, like reach out to me. Hit me up on LinkedIn or something like that, and I'll be glad to like talk things through. And it doesn't have to be like, you have a question on a project, or I'm not going to try to sell you on anything. If you have a question about security or starting a company and stuff like that, I will answer to the best of my ability for that particular answer that I have. And if I don't have the answer for you, I'll try to find someone that does have the answer, right? I have many friends that are infinitely more successful at business than I could ever dream about, right? And they will probably have an answer for you. It may not be the answer that you want to hear, and it may not be an answer I necessarily agree with, but it will be a correct answer when coming to like transacting in the business space.
Yeah. I love that about the security community. Like most people are willing to help others trying to get in and be successful, but having that stellar sort of MO of always being the guy who gives his best, effort for everything that he engages in. It's amazing.
Like I always say, don't be a gatekeeper, be a gate opener.
Yep.
Yeah. Because getting through gates and opening them up is much more faster, much funner, if that's a word, much more fun, than locking gates up anyway, right? No one got excited locking a gate up. Everyone gets excited picking a lock open.
That's right.
That's fun. Yeah. And then like to your point about higher impact projects, then you win for your consultants too, and your team
Right.
gets to do more fun stuff, right? Which
Yeah.
attracts better talent, right?
Agreed. So we're going to wrap it up. Drew, you were an amazing guest. Pacer Tracer,
Thank you.
you asked some really amazing questions. Sledge, you never noticed when I changed what it says under your name, and I love that about
I
you.
noticed. I thought it was funny, so I left it.
What does it say?
Can't hack his way out of a paper.
So I had a great time. Thank you all. I'm going to hit the outro video. Oh, we got one more comment maybe. I enjoy a good lock every now and then. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
All.
And
Thank you.
if you want to know more about getting through locks, you could just, self-plug here. Look up Porter Tradecraft on Instagram or YouTube. And there's not a lot of content on there right now, only a few videos. But there'll be a lot more coming out here.
Please like and subscribe for more content. And if you run a bot farm, please have all your bots like and subscribe.
Yeah. Well, don't necessarily have all your bots like and subscribe. That will get my video shadow banned. So
That's not. I mean, you know what I mean.
I've done that.
Found a way around the metrics. Oh God,
it's a good way to nuke somebody's account. Just have a bunch of bots following like their stuff. They're gone.
Well, if you write your bots like shit, I guess, and they can detect them.
That's the point. I'm using quality bots for this. Whatever's on GitHub.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just watch the videos for the whole time. That's what YouTube gets happy about.
Yeah.
Exactly. All 3 hours and 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Guys, it's been great. I'm gonna hit our outro, and if anybody else has any questions, pop them in the YouTube comments. We do monitor them, and we can get them over to Drew, or just hit up Drew on all the channels that he's already provided.
Cool.
All right, hackers and cyber warriors, it's time to encrypt this episode and send it out into the digital ether. Thank you to Sledge, Delchi, CrowdStrong, and Altkey for another epic nerd out session. And a special thanks to our guests for joining us. And to all our listeners out there in the cyber trenches, patch fast, encrypt tight, lock down your ports, and leave no backdoor open. Hunt threats like it's open season. Keep your passwords long, your MFA enabled. Don't use SMS as a second factor. Keep your malware signatures up to date, your critical data backed up, and your network locked down like Fort Knox. Until our next PunFest, stay vigilant, stay curious, and above all, stay CounterSurveil. Whether you're pen testing networks or hardening your own defenses, remember, in the game of cybersecurity, you're either the hunter or the hunted. So sharpen those skills, mask those IPs, and we'll see you on the dark side of the net.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.